morning, everybody. I am Mel Barrett.
I'm Rebecca Lavoie, allegedly. I'm Smart.
Happy Monday, everybody. I am Mel Barrett.
I'm Rebecca Lavoie. Happy gay summer, Mel.
Happy hump day, everybody. I am Mel Barrett.
I'm not humping anybody. I'm Rebecca Lavoie.
Happy Saturday, everybody. I am Mel Barrett.
Oh, no.
I'm Rebecca Lavoie, and my mic is muted.
Good morning, everybody. I am Mel Barrett.
I'm Rebecca Lavoie, and that's Briscoe.
And welcome to Something's Off, a true crime podcast where we swat the haters aside with our astute takes and humor and joy. And
the joylessness
I don't
of
give
those
a fucking
people.
miss. Blah.
Hags.
You hear it first in the break in the story. One little crack and the whole thing gets wary. A witness swears but the timeline bends. A smile too smooth and the trail just ends. Mel Barrett says, hold up, look again. Rebecca Lavoie follows every thread. If it feels too neat, then it's not the truth. There's a shadow line running through the room. Something's off, something's off. You can feel it in the bones. Something's off, something's off. When the facts won't come home. Something's off, something's off. And the case won't stay in place. Something's off. We're the ones who chase.
We're gonna go members only.
Yeah, we're the ones who chase. Wait, did that witness just blink 3 times? Something's off. Something's off.
Hello, everybody. I am Mel Barrett. Welcome to Something's Off. I guess I didn't need to say that because I said it about 17 times in the intro video. I'm here on my own tonight talking about a little bit of Pam Smart. Go ahead, take a drink. I know you guys have heard me talk about this a lot, but it has been, it's a case I've been working on for over a decade, as some of you know. Before I started doing this with Rebecca, I just cooked dinner. I probably have like dinner on me from amazing. Before I started working with Ms. Rebecca Lavoie, I had a podcast called The In Between Podcast. I still have it, actually. And I have done 2 full investigative series. The first one was Pam Smart's case, and the second one was Veronica Rodriguez's case. I'm working on a 3rd season about the Sunnyside rapist, which happened in West Virginia in the 80s and 90s. And first of all, if you guys hear, if it sounds like I'm in a wind tunnel, I'm really sorry. It is 100 degrees here, and I don't have air conditioning in the pod. So I've got like 3 fans on me. So I apologize right off the top, but I'm not going to be able to turn the fans off because I'm sweaty. I'm so sweaty. So anyway, backstory here, for those of you who don't know, is that I grew up in New Hampshire, and I was 15 when the Pamela Smart trial happened. Now, I'm sure a lot of you know about the Pamela Smart trial, or at least know her name, or can, you know, picture her face. And there are probably a lot of you who don't know about it. I think anybody who is, you know, millennial or younger may not know too much about it. It's one of those cases that made a huge splash in like the National Enquirer and those kind of magazines and newspapers. It was the first televised trial in New Hampshire, and it was broadcast nationally and eventually worldwide. And so whenever anyone talks about OJ being like the first like full televised trial, I always think, no, that was Pam Smart. And we did it in tiny little New Hampshire, where I was 15 years old and I lived right down the street, not many miles away from the courthouse. And this was a big spectacle because it was trashy. The people that were involved, including Pam Smart, they were kids. I mean, she had just turned 22. The other people who were involved in the unaliving of Pam Smart's husband, Greg Smart, were all under the age of 19. So that will give you some sort of a picture. We're dealing with really reckless kids in 1990. So I was 15, 1990, and we would sometimes skip school to stay home and watch this trial. all of the women in the neighborhood, my mother, my aunts, my grandmother, we would all gather at either my grandmother's house or our house or my aunt's house, and everybody would watch the trial. Sometimes my friends and I would skip school and we would go down to the courthouse to see if we could get on camera, because this teeny tiny, and I mean teeny tiny little town in New Hampshire called Exeter was swarming with national media, and it was insane to us. So right off the bat, it was this sort of media, like Karen Reed on steroids is the only way I can think of it. Like the way that the media has, talked about Karen Reed, put that on steroids. There were books being written while the trial was happening. There were documentaries, the local news. There's a local news station in New Hampshire. It's called WMUR. They're still around. They usually cover most of the Pam Smart stuff. They were in the courtroom. They had a live feed every day. So that's how we were all watching it. But there was one reporter who did a ton of work on this case before it went to trial. And he had become close to Pam. And, she didn't shy away from the media. I think along the lines of Karen, Pam thought, I've got to tell my story. I've got to get my story out there. And, this is the only way I'm going to be able to do it because no one's listening to me. So she would do interviews with the local press. And they had so much information. The local reporters had so much information from the local cops, the local, like everybody, the teenagers, the townies who were hanging out in the bars talking about the case, that they actually made an entire documentary. So it's funny to me because we're talking about the Karen Reed stuff right now and how a judge is chastising her for talking to a documentary producer before her trial is over. There was a documentary made about this case with a final outcome, which was that Pam was guilty. And that documentary was created. It was filmed, edited, produced, everything, and finalized and released to the public on WMUR, our local television, 3 days before the trial started. So 3 days before the trial started, the local press, WMUR, made a documentary based on information they had gathered in the course of the investigation, and they claimed that Pam Smart was guilty before the trial, before jury selection. So that's sort of the background. Now the actual crime that happened, and actually, before I get really, really heavy into this, I want to say right off the top, one of the things that people have gotten upset with me about in my reporting on this case is that they feel that I gloss over the very inappropriate relationship that Pam Smart had with Bill Flynn. Pam Smart was 22 when they met. Bill Flynn was 15 when they started having a sexual relationship. There's no other word for me to call it but a sexual relationship because it was consensual, except for the fact that Bill was 16. He was 16 eventually. And contrary to popular belief, their sexual intimacy, whatever was happening between them, it only happened for a couple of weeks. It didn't go on for months or years. And I'm not saying that to excuse it. I am a co-parent. I'm a bonus parent. I know there are parents in the audience. I would want to tear this person apart if I found out they were having sex with my 15, 16-year-old kid, even if they were only 22, 21, 22. So what I want to say off the top is, if I say words like asexual relationship, please understand that I know that a 22-year-old person having sex with a 15 or 16-year-old child is statutory rape. I understand that. And actually, Pam Smart understands that as well. So I want to get that right off the top. And what I'll tell you is the story that we were told first, and then we're going to break it down. And I'll tell you a little bit more about what I discovered in my investigative process. So the story that we were told was that Pam Smart was a local teacher at Winnicott High School, which is, how do I describe where Winnicott is? I don't know. Those of you in the chat who are from New Hampshire, help me out here. Actually, before I get into this, I just kind of like dove into it. I didn't say hi to anybody. I didn't do anything. I don't have Rebecca here to like talk to. Rebecca's back is killing her, by the way. We almost canceled tomorrow because she's in a lot of pain. And I was like, let's not do this. Let's not have you sit in a chair, so. But She wants to do it. She's powering through. Let me just look at the chat really quickly, answer any questions that I can. I will say, as I'm telling you about this case and discussing it with you, if you have questions, put the questions in the chat. I'm going to try to star as many questions as I see, and I will answer to the best of my ability any questions you guys have. I don't want to call myself an expert on this case, but I do think of myself kind of as an expert. I've done there's a documentary that's going to be coming out possibly next year with a major market that I can't really talk about. I'm sure most of you know who I'm talking about. And then I also did an episode for Nightline that was a really good breakdown of what's happening with the case right now. And I sort of came in to explain the story to everybody. And sort of, there are a lot of characters in this, and I have most of them in my brain. So that's what my background is. But let me talk to the chat really quick, and then we'll get into it. If you have questions, put them in the chat, and then I will answer them if I can. And, you know, one thing I will say, there are a lot of haters out there. There are a lot of people, you know, think about the way the antis talk about Karen Reed. And like I said, put that on steroids. The state of New Hampshire and the people in the state of New Hampshire had their image of this case and the information given to them from this case so twisted back in the 90s that these people still hold so much hatred in their heart for this woman. And again, I'm not going to make excuses for anything that she actually did do, but I will say she is still a human being, and was a 22-year-old person when this happened. So she's now 57. She's been in prison for 35 years, and she is serving a life without parole sentence. What I'll say to the chat is I expect that there will be some haters. I've already seen a few of them on Twitter. I'm just sort of ignoring them for now. Unless you have a good faith question or disagreement with me, then we can talk it out. But if you're just going to come in and say that slut should die, then I'm not going to talk to you about this, because you aren't coming at this from a good place, from a good faith place. If you're not open to discussion about it, then it's difficult to have the discussion if we're both going to just back into our corners of confirmation bias. I hope that makes sense. And if people get too ridiculous and disgusting in the comments, I will block people. But I'm warning the chat right now that you might see some haters in here. You might see some people saying some really horrific things. Because if you go and look at any of the WMUR articles about Pam Smart, one of them came out today, one came out yesterday. It is a deluge of comments that are just like, you know, let's hang her in the town square, basically. This is like Salem witch trials all over again, in my opinion. Okay, so let's see. Hi, Simna. Hi, New Hampshire woman. Where are you from, New Hampshire woman? Where are you from? New Hampshire woman said, I was 23 when this trial happened, and I was shocked that anything like that could happen in our small state of New Hampshire. We all were. And we all thought we were celebrities, too. I mean, in my family anyway, because we were, you know, around all these like national news cameras, and like Hollywood was there. There were movies being made, and Nicole Kidman and Helen Hunt, and, you know, all this stuff. And yes, please, as you come in, please like the video. It helps us with our algorithm. And if you feel like giving a tip, why don't I have anything on the screen? Oh, because my background is not showing. Let's see if I can make that happen. I don't even have a little background. That's weird. Hold on. I never know. Oh, that's too small. And I went away. I can't. That's a little bit better. Okay. If you do want to send a tip, we appreciate it. The tips, you know, help us because they don't take like the 30 or 40% or whatever it is that YouTube takes. So you can leave a tip through Venmo, Cash App, or PayPal. Go and become a member of our private Facebook group. Something's Off. It's a lot of fun over there. We have a lot of discussions about these kinds of cases. And if you're not a member, become a member. We have so much fun on Monday nights, and we're going to be adding more member streams here shortly. I don't know if I should tell you guys this. Yeah, I'm going to tell you. It doesn't matter. Today I was like, hey, Rebecca, the new Scott Peterson documentary is coming out tomorrow. We should do a members only pop culture stream on Scott Peterson, since we both have such strong opinions about that case. So we're thinking about it. Let us know if that's what you would like to see. I'd like to do it. We'll see what happens. Let's see. Give me just a second. It's so weird to have like dead air, like have someone not talking to me. We'll be okay. We can do this. I was the same, just a girl from the 6. I was the same age as Pam Smart in 90 and followed the case from Canada. I now live in Mass and have a cottage in New Hampshire about an hour from Exeter. It's time she was released. Winnicunnet's in Hampton. That's right. Hampton. I always get Winnicunnet confused with Pinkerton. Pinkerton? No. Yeah. Pinkerton Academy. I went to Dover, so I lived in a different part of the state, but let's see. Okay. Tell Rebecca it's YouTube. She can lean back on the sofa like TV did in his glare talk. We won't mind. I don't think Rebecca would be comfortable if she did that. It's like her ribs, so she can't, like, leaning back, I'm sure hurts quite a bit. Let's see. Are we playing the Mel mentions Pam Smart drinking game? Because if so, I need to run to the liquor store. You can if you want, Ellie. You can if you want. Let's see. Have the victim's family commented? TC Nerd says. Yes, they comment all the time. They've been commenting for 35 plus years. And in fact, Greg's mom and dad were partially responsible for Pam being transferred out of New Hampshire to New York State, where she's been for 32 years. They did not want her in the state anymore, so they got rid of her. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, RIP Greg Smart. I don't want to lose Greg Smart in this. He was a young guy too. He was 24 at the time of his murder, and it should never have happened. The whole thing is horrible and stupid, and I wish it never happened. And it changed a lot of people's lives. Grew up in Somersworth, class of 86. Whoa. Yeah, I went to Dover. The others, we'll get to it. I'll get to it. Some of these questions I'm going to get to, and I'll answer them for you. So, okay. I think that's mostly it. I'm willing to hear your thoughts on Scott Peterson. So yeah, Pinkerton Academy is in Derry. Derry, New Hampshire is where the murder actually happened. So that's why I was thinking of Pinkerton. I think Pam may have gone to Pinkerton. That I don't remember. How did Greg's parents feel about her possibility of being released? First of all, there's not a possibility of her being released. This is not, the state of New Hampshire has never overturned a murder conviction ever. And there are 2 people in prison for life without parole sentences who are getting elderly at this point. And so, they're starting to think about their sentencing rules in New Hampshire. But one of the big parts about this case is actually the sentence, which I'll get to in just a moment. I'm going to try to give you guys a Cliff Notes version. I did 12 plus episodes on this for the In Between podcast. So I'm going to try to narrow that down into the next hour or so. We'll see how that goes. The boys are not in jail. No, she was not transferred out because she had so many prisoner violations. That is incorrect, but that's what the media was saying. She did take a beating in Goffstown, but that's not why she was transferred out. Let's see. Okay. Pam was from Wyndham. I lived in Wyndham. Yeah, I feel like she went to Pinkerton though, maybe for a year or 2. I don't know. 10 minutes behind. Yep, you're defending a pedophile. Aw, no, I'm actually not. But thanks for the comment, Rissa. Pamela Smart was not a classroom teacher. Yeah, so I'm going to get into all of this. Okay, so I think I got through everything. And let's see. Everyone takes a beating in Goffstown. That's what I have heard as well. Okay. So back in 1990, Pamela Smart's 22 years old. She is not a teacher. She was a media studies coordinator, and she worked for the county, basically. So she would travel around to a bunch of the schools in the district. She would work with some of the students and create media projects, video projects that would help them raised their self-esteem. So she wasn't actually a teacher, which is that was one of the first things the media said about her, and it was not true. And she has not been able to get rid of that title of teacher. She never was a teacher. In 35 plus years, people still call her a teacher. They say that she was seducing students, which she was not a teacher. So, Pam and Greg met when Pam was in college in Florida, and they got married like within a year later after they moved back to New Hampshire. Greg he became an insurance salesman like his dad. He worked together with his dad. And I think Greg, this part's my opinion, but I think Greg was wanting to start, or at least his parents and their parents maybe were wanting them to start, sort of settling down. They were both like into heavy metal. They both Pam loved Van Halen. She had a license plate on her car that said Halen. Her dog was named Halen. She was like obsessed with Van Halen. She loved like hair bands. And so when she met Greg had this like big, huge, bushy like mane of hair that she loved. When he became an insurance salesman, he chopped that off and he looked very much like buttoned up in his suit. So I think she was 21 when they got married, and he was 23, 24. They were about to celebrate their 1-year wedding anniversary when all this happened. In the first year of their marriage, they were having some issues. They were living together in a condo in Derry. And, Greg was going to work. Pam was going to work. She was actually at the time making more money than Greg was, which is, I've always found that fact really interesting, because a lot of people say that Pam did this for the insurance money or for, whatever she could get from Greg's job. But Pam was actually making more money than Greg was at the time. And they were doing their thing, but they were having difficulties at home. They weren't ready to be married. They were kids themselves. They weren't, they were learning to live together, all that stuff. There are rumors, and I don't want to, I have good sources on this, but I hesitate to go into it too much because that's not what this is about. But there was some abuse and violence in the relationship from Greg to Pam. And that's all I'm going to say about that. It doesn't have a lot to do with what happened. But what does have to do with what happened is Greg had an affair. He had a one-night stand. He didn't come home one night. The next day, he told her what happened. She was devastated, insecure, felt really shitty about herself. Their marriage was sort of like eek, on the rocks. And that's where Bill Flynn enters. So Pam had just met Bill. They had been working on Project Self-Esteem together, along with Vance Latomy Jr., who we'll call Junior, and Cecilia Pierce, who was Pam's 15-year-old intern at the time. And Pam, like I said, at that time, she was 21. So she was hanging out with all these kids, and they were going out and they were making these videos together. A lot of the stuff that they did had nothing to do with school at all. It was always outside of school. They would be driving around together. Sometimes they would be drinking together. They were doing these projects together. And then when Greg cheated, Pam, was feeling insecure. Bill had a crush on Pam and started to show that to her. And she, what's the word I'm looking for? I think she welcomed it. I think that anybody in that situation, if someone's showing you attention and your spouse or your partner has just cheated on you, you probably are, but it was wrong because Bill, like I said, was 15 at the time. And so they did this sort of weird flirting thing. They were sort of hiding it from a lot of people. They were mostly writing love letters to one another for a long time. And then eventually, while Greg was out of town on business, Cecilia and Billy came to stay at Pam's house, and they had sex for the first time. And that's if you remember the trial and you remember all the sensational news around the trial, you'll remember the ice cubes, because the ice cubes, they recreated a scene from, oh shit, now I can't think of the movie. That's so crazy. There's that movie where they rub ice cubes on each other and then they have sex. They recreated that. Cecilia was in the house when it happened. It's reported that Cecilia had a tremendous crush on Billy as well. Billy was this kid who, I hate it when people say like wrong side of the tracks or whatever. Billy lived in Hampton, and all of his friends lived in Hampton. So that's why they all went to Winnicott. Thanks for, I should have even, I don't know why I was like, what's the name of the town? Hampton is a beach town. It's, of all the beach towns in that area along the coast of New Hampshire, like I wasn't allowed to go to Hampton by myself when I was a kid because, you know, it was messy there. It was real messy there. You know, it was like when you had to be careful of like stepping on syringes and stuff when you were walking in the sand, and the boardwalk was like notorious. Like that's where all the, you know, the deals went down, and there were riots sometimes and like crazy shit happened in Hampton. And so the boys were from there, and they had a lot of freedom. These boys had a ton of freedom. So the boys that are involved in this are Bill Flynn, who was, you know, in this relationship with Pam, JR, who was one of Bill's best friends, and then Pete Randall, who I'll call Pete. His name's Patrick Randall, but everybody called him Pete, and Raymond Fowler. And then Raymond Fowler's older brother, Robert, sometimes hung around, but he was a lot older than them. So all these kids sort of hung out together. They had total freedom. The boys were complicated. And as part of the trial, eventually, the boys' juvenile records were not allowed to be admitted as evidence or, you know, any kind of impeachment material because they were juveniles at the time. So all of that was impounded. What we now know is that they were sort of violent criminals. They were going around town and they were stealing cars. They were burglarizing cars, breaking into homes, burglarizing homes. Pete Randall almost beat his stepfather to death with a baseball bat. They beat each other up. They were sort of independent, lawless boys. Now, if you grew up in the 90s, yeah, that was, I mean, I had a ton of independence. Our kids don't have a tenth of the independence that I had when I was a kid. There were no cell phones. We went out. Our parents didn't know where we were. And we came back when we were supposed to come back. Or if we didn't have a curfew, we did whatever the hell we wanted. And oftentimes, I remember being 16 years old and one of my best friends was 19. So there wasn't like, there was this, kids didn't grow, they grew up really fast, but then they came to a stopping point and everyone just hung out together. If you went to high school, those people who didn't go off to college, which in the area where I grew up and in this area, a lot of people didn't go off to college. Those kids just hung out and they became the kids with the cars who could get the beer, you know? So, Billy, JR, Pete, Raymond, they all hung out together. There were a couple of other boys. They're not really significant in the telling of this story, but they could become significant later. When I found them going through the case file and the police file, I found some really interesting things in there. Anyway, so this affair happens. This inappropriate relationship with Billy Flynn happens. Pam feels guilty immediately and she tries to call it off. That goes on for a couple of weeks, as I understand it. Bill is getting a little bit obsessive. He's not leaving her alone. He's threatening to tell Greg about them. And she's like, you know, we can't keep doing this. And then they would fall back into it. And she had broken up with him and said, you know, we can't do this anymore. I'm married. I need to work on my relationship. And Bill, like I said, he was getting, you know, I think it's tough. I think it's tough when you're that age and you have fallen in love with somebody and they become your world. You know, you don't understand that like you're going to have a million other relationships in your life. This is not the be all and end all. It's, you know, it is what it is. There are rumors out there. They're not rumors. There are lies out there that Bill was completely inexperienced and that Pam taught him everything. And that Bill had never had sex before. And that just isn't true. That lie was actually said at the trial, which we'll get into a little bit later. Again, not that it matters. They had an inappropriate relationship. So basically Billy is starting to get pretty obsessive. And Pam is like, you know, we can't be together because I'm married. So if Greg wasn't around, then maybe, but we can't be together because I'm married, right? And the story goes that Pam had also fallen head over heels in love with Billy, and that she wanted to get out of her marriage. And so she convinced these boys who they think they act as the prosecutors acted as if this was sort of all premeditated on her part. Like she pinpointed these boys, she manipulated these boys, and then she came up with a murder plot and she told them what she wanted them to do, and if they didn't do it she would withhold sex. That's what the prosecutors were selling. That is not how I understand it, but basically there is this opaque gray plan that Billy is going to kill Greg. And the reason why I say there was a plan and it was opaque is because a bunch of the kids were talking about it. Cecilia was talking about it. Cecilia was 15. She worked at Papa John's, which is like it was a local chain restaurant in New England. It's now owned by D'Angelo's. And at work, Cecilia had mentioned to somebody, allegedly, that her friend Pam wanted her husband dead. At the same time, Billy is frantically looking for a weapon to use. And he wants to use a pew pew. He wants to use a GUN. And so Cecilia's like, well, I know where you can get one of those. My stepdad has one in the attic. And he's like, no, that's too difficult. And she's like, well, this woman I work with, Tammy Robertson, she says she has one. She keeps one in the car. So why don't you just come by when Tammy's at work with me and I'll let you know, and you can go and break into her car and get the GUN. And he's like, that sounds like a plan. So one night, Cecilia calls Billy from Papa John's and says, hey, Tammy's car is here. It's in the parking lot. It's the red, blah, 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 the red car. Billy comes. I think he was with JR. He was either with JR or Raymond at the time. He breaks into this woman's car. He doesn't find what he's looking for. And so that one was a bust. And then another time, Cecilia's like, hey, this woman has a car and she parks it here and there's a GUN in the car. And so Billy and JR drive over to this car and they break in again. And actually, no, I take that back. They didn't find the car that night. And I think they got a little bit scared, so they didn't go through with it. And then eventually they sort of bring Pete into this. Now, Pete is the most violent of the crew. He's the one that I told you about that almost beat his stepfather to death with a bat. They get Pete involved, and Pete's like, let's just do it, kind of thing. And so a couple of weeks before Greg is actually unalived, they make an attempt, meaning they drive out to Pam's condo. And then they get scared and they go back. A couple other weeks go by and JR mentions that his dad has a gun. And so they're like, well, let's do that. And so they steal JR's dad's GUN, and Pam, they pick a night where Pam is at a like a county teachers association thing where she's got to go and she's got to submit a budget for the new year, and she's trying to get a bigger position within the county. And so she's at this meeting. Pete, JR is driving. Pete and Billy are in the back seat, and Raymond's sitting in the front seat. I don't know why they brought Raymond along. What I've heard from Raymond, and what I've heard from Raymond's brother, Robert, is that he was out hitching a ride and trying to get to his girlfriend's house, and they told him that they would bring him to his girlfriend's house. And so he went with them thinking he was going to his girlfriend's house. And when he found out he wasn't going to his girlfriend's house because they were driving out to Derry, which is a good 20-30 minute drive, he was like, well, I'll go with you guys as long as you buy me dinner, basically. And so they drive out to Derry. They go to this shopping plaza that's right behind Pam's condo. And JR and Raymond go into the pizza shop. They get something to eat. They go into the music, the record store. Meanwhile, Billy and Pete take off through the woods that separates the shopping plaza and the condo. They go to the condo. They go in through the basement door. This is really important. So there's a bulkhead. And if you don't know what a bulkhead is, it's the outside entrance to the basement of a house. In New England, we have them. They're sort of, they're sort of angled toward the ground, and they have two doors that open up like this. And you go down a set of steps and you're in the basement of a house. So the door to the bulkhead had been left unlocked. Billy and Pete go in through the bulkhead. They come up through the condo. They tell the prosecutors that Pam said, "Take whatever you want, just don't hurt my dog," in preparation for this. So her dog was like her baby, and they pick the dog up and they kick it down the basement steps. Luckily, it didn't die. They go into the house. They're very nervous. They ransack, what they can. They throw a bunch of jewelry into pillowcases. They steal whatever they can. They steal stereo speakers and shit like that. And then Greg is supposed to be home from work at a certain time. So they wait by the front door. There's a little hallway from the front door. Billy waits behind the door. Billy waits behind the door and Pete waits across the hall. And Greg walks in. Billy grabs him in basically like a chokehold from behind. And Pete is standing in front of him. And he's holding a knife. And they're like, "We're here to rob you. Give us your money, blah, blah, blah." And he says, "Don't take my wedding band. My wife will kill me." And then Billy Flynn allegedly shoots Greg in the head. And they leave him there, and they get all the stuff they took, and they hightail it back through the woods to the getaway car. And when they get in the car, JR takes off. Raymond's in the front seat. Billy and Pete are in the back, and they're stripping off the clothes and the gloves and all this stuff. And they're throwing it out the window. They're telling the boys what they did. The boys don't believe them right off the bat until they see all the stuff that they stole. And then from there, JR drives them to Hampton Beach, which is where they all live. And they go down to the boardwalk and they sell all of the stuff that they stole, or most of the stuff that they stole from Pam's. And they buy coke with it. So they buy a little bit of cocaine with the stuff that they stole. Whatever they had that was left over, they all go back to Raymond's house, which is Raymond lives in his mom's house with his brother Robert. His brother Robert is upstairs cooking dinner for his baby. The boys run in the house. They go down into the basement, into Raymond's room. Robert kind of yells at them like, what the fuck are you guys doing? And they're just like, "Mind your own business." And they go downstairs. As far as I understand it, and from what Robert has told me, they left a bunch of, they left whatever they stole, whatever little bits and pieces they stole in Raymond's bedroom, though it has not been found. So Pam comes home from her school board meeting, and she walks in the front door and she finds Greg, and she immediately starts screaming, and she goes to the neighbors, and they call 911, and the cops come out. And within, just a little bit of time, the investigation starts. Pam is taken out of the house. She goes to her mom's house. Everybody is sort of, keeping her corralled. She is in a state of complete shock. She's put on all these different kinds of meds like Prozac and a bunch of things to try to get, some sleep and stuff like that. The investigators, she's answering all their questions. She's doing everything she can. And then that's it. The case just kind of stalls. They have a lot of physical evidence. They have some fingerprints. They have, obviously Greg. They have a towel that was left next to Greg. They have a pillow that has what looks like a bullet hole in it, that was used sort of as a silencer. But that's really all they have. And Greg didn't have any enemies. He occasionally smoked pot and sold pot, but nothing came from that. And so this investigation goes on. It just goes. And they don't know who it is. They don't know what's going on until there are a couple of kids at school who start spreading the rumor that Bill and JR were involved in Greg Smart's unaliving. Once that happens, a couple of students come forward. They mention it to the police. A couple of tips came into the police. One of the tips was from a woman named Cindy Butt, who was the woman who Cecilia told that her friend Pam wanted her husband dead. So she calls in a tip. And eventually, there's an extra boy here that I haven't talked about. His name is Ralph. And Ralph lives with JR and JR's parents. And Ralph and JR and the boys have been best friends since they were little. Billy's the actual outsider here. Billy's the only one who wasn't born and raised in New Hampshire. Billy moved there with his single mother. So Ralph overhears his best friends talking about what happened. And one day he bursts into the room where they're talking about it, and he asks them directly, "Did you do this?" And Pete Randall says, tells him, "No, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about, blah, blah, blah." And Ralph is like, "I heard you talking about this." And he keeps pushing it and pushing it. And finally they all end up outside. And again, Pete shows his violent side and kicks the shit out of Ralph in the driveway. But Ralph doesn't stop there. He goes to JR's parents and he says, "Hey, I think JR and Pete and Billy and Raymond were involved in the Greg Smart unaliving. And I think they used your gun." And so JR's dad goes to look for his gun, finds that it has just recently been cleaned and put back and was a little bit wonky and didn't know what was going on. He takes the gun. He and his wife and Ralph go down to the local Derry police. And he walks in and he said, "I think this is the Schmurder weapon that was used to kill Greg Smart. And I think my son has something to do with it." The police immediately interrogate Ralph. Ralph tells them what he knows, which is that Billy was obsessed with Pam, and that he thinks that's why Billy did it. And that Billy has been talking, has made passing comments that if Greg wasn't around, Pam and I could be together, kind of thing. Hold on, I got to take some coffee because I'm talking a lot. Actually, I'm going to hold right there. We're going to look at some comments and questions. Are you guys bored to tears? I feel like I've told this story so many times. I feel like I'm sitting around a campfire with y'all right now. Okay. I'm going to go back like 10 minutes. Actually, yeah, I'm going to go back like 10 minutes. Okay. Good old days, Petty says. Cruise the strip, Lori says. Yep. I grew up in Amesbury. Just pointing out the hypocrisy. I don't know what you said, Justice. Sorry. I didn't catch what you said. Oh, I guess Justice is a troll. Isn't it called victim shaming when you trash the reputation of a murder victim? No, I'm just telling the truth about who they are and what was going on at the time. I'm not trashing them. I'm telling the truth. They were violent. They broke into people's houses, which is what they ended up doing to Greg and Pam. And they ended up murdering somebody, and one of them almost murdered somebody. So I don't see that as, it would be victim shaming if somebody had died when they had been brutally raped and I brought up their sexual history in a way, like saying they deserved it. That would be victim shaming in my opinion, but maybe not. You. I always thought she was a teacher too. Yeah, Cassie, that is one of the biggest lies, I think, because I thought that too. And there's something that happens in your brain. If you think about the Mary Kay Letourneau case, right? And you think about, she definitely was a teacher and she definitely took advantage of a 12-year-old boy who she ended up marrying. So it's like, that's kind of weird. But when you hear a teacher did this, there's a lot of shame in that. There's a lot of, burner at the stake kind of thing. When you look at it from the perspective of, she was a 22-year-old media studies coordinator for the county school district. She never actually was a teacher. She actually had to work with kids on the same level as herself. I don't know. And again, I'm really, it's so difficult to talk about this aspect of it because in my opinion, after all the research I've done and all the people I've spoken with, people are most upset about the fact that she is a statutory rapist. which I understand, and they should be upset about that. That does not make one a murderer, nor does it mean that you should spend the rest of your life without the possibility of parole in prison. She should have paid for those crimes, absolutely, and she says that herself. She knows that that is true. Okay, let's see. My computer's hot. Good old days. The gates of hell. Cruise the Strip. I grew up in Amesbury. They used to rent hotels to us when we were 18 in York and the Hamptons. Oh my God. York's my favorite beach. Short Sands is my favorite beach in Limonene. And I heard they had a great white shark in Short Sands the other day, which means I will never ever go in the water at Short Sands ever again. I know absolutely. Allie says, I know absolutely nothing about the New England. I did have so much independence though. Started driving and taking care of myself at 15. I had no boundaries. Exactly. I did the same when I was 16 and I was out of the house when I was 17. So, TC Nerd says, I knew predatory male teachers when I was in high school, but not predatory female teachers, except for this one lesbian teacher who was cheerleader coach. Are you talking about Glee? This is the case that I remember getting me interested in true crime. It was probably that for me too, true crime fan. So what I was doing when all this was happening was obviously I was going down to the courthouse. I was watching everything. But the worst part about it for me and how it formed my opinion about Pam Smart in this case is that I was surrounded by adults who were like, that whore, look at her, she's an ice princess, oh, she's too good for everybody else, oh, she hasn't shown enough emotion. I mean, like, where have we heard all of that before, right? So in my 15-year-old brain, I'm like, yeah, she's a whore. Like, what the like, why would a teacher do this is so fucked up, blah blah blah. And I lived with that, and I lived with that opinion until I was in my mid-30s, and then I saw a documentary which I would suggest everybody go and watch. It was the first really good documentary about Pam Smart that told us a lot more about the case. That documentary is called Captivated. It's on HBO. And I think it's called Captivated Trial by Media. And that's how I was introduced. And so when I was in like my mid-30s, was it mid-30s? Late 30s. I saw this documentary, and that would have been 2014, 15 or so. And it blew my mind because I sat and I went, oh my God, I am responsible for this. Meaning I am part of the village that burned this woman at the stake, and I was wrong. And the amount of guilt that I felt over that, it really got me. And I did something I'd never done before. So this is right when I started, I was listening to Serial. I was listening to Rebecca and Kevin with Crime Writers On. I was listening to Ellen, and back then He Who Shall Not Be Named. And so I was listening to all these podcasts. I had been a screenwriter myself. And so I was actually working on a true crime screenplay at the time. And so I was doing a lot of research. I watched this documentary, and then I was just like, I was blown over. I couldn't sleep for like a week. I would wake up in the middle of the night and be like, what can I do? What do I do to right this wrong? Is the only way I could think of it, And so what I did do, and something I'd never done before, was I sat down and I wrote a letter to Pam Smart. And I told her what I was feeling, which was, I told her about my background. I was 15 years old, in Exeter. And I thought you were a predatory teacher who was a slut and a whore. And I think that you manipulated those kids and all these things. And I want to tell you that I'm absolutely wrong about that. I know that that's not the case now, unfortunately. And I want to do something to tell your story. And I have a media background. I'm a screenwriter, I'm a producer, I'm a director, I'm an editor. I can put together some narrative pieces or nonfiction pieces. I can, build a website. I don't know what I can do. You tell me what you need, basically. And then she wrote back to me. And back then we didn't have the messaging systems that we have now for prisons. So we were just handwriting letters back and forth. And then after a couple of months, I think it was, Pam put me on her phone list, and she called me one day, and I sat down and I had a conversation with Pam Smart for like an hour. And that went on for a couple of years. And eventually I started recording my conversations with her, which she knew about, obviously. I mean, the calls are recorded anyway because it's prison, but I started recording my conversations with her. And so back from 2015 to 2017, I have many hours of audio of talking to Pam, asking her hard questions too, because there were things that didn't make sense to me that I wanted to understand, like the wiretaps, which we'll get into in a moment. And does she feel responsible? Did she do the things that they said she did? I've asked her, I don't even know how many times, did you do this, Pam? Are you a murderer? And emphatically, it's no. Every time to this day, 35 years later. Now, some would say, and I've already seen these comments, I think in some of the chat, and I've definitely seen them on Twitter and Facebook. The reason why the state of New Hampshire won't let Pam Smart go is because she won't say she's guilty. That's a crock of shit. Because I also interviewed for the podcast the lead prosecutor in the case, Maggiato, who is a very interesting character. And he said the same thing to me. Well, if Pam would just say she did it, if Pam would just accept, responsibility. And then my next question is, and then what? Because she's serving life without parole. And the answer is, well, people would have more respect for her. That's not how it works. When I hear that someone for 35 years has been emphatic about denying that they are a murderer, I tend to believe that the easy way out would be to say you did it, because that might get you some leniency. That's what the boys did. That might get you some leniency. I have a conversation with Pam recorded where she is on the verge of tears and telling me, Mel, my family, my friends, everyone is telling me, just say you did it so you can get out of prison and come home. And I can't do it because I didn't do it, So when I hear that, and she could be lying to me. So go ahead, you can say that in the comments. She could be lying to me, but I put myself in her shoes and I say, if I've been in prison for 35 years and everyone's telling me the easiest thing would be for me to just say that I did this, that I planned this, because that's what she's in prison for, is the planning. I probably would do it. I mean, that's what the West Memphis 3 had to do. They had to, file an Alford plea, which basically says, I'm telling you I did this, but I don't, but I know, and I know I didn't do it, but I'm telling you this so you'll let me out of prison. She won't take an Alford plea. Not that one's been offered to her, but she would not take an Alford plea. So anyway, let me look at some of these other questions. Massborn said, yeah, Hampton was the ritzy part of Salisbury, where Salisbury was the trash part of town. Allie said, oh, I thought I was going to die when my boyfriend of a year at age 14, 15 moved to New Jersey. Yeah, I understand. I fell in love when I was 16 with my best friend, who also loved me back. And it was before, we really knew what was happening with our identities. And her father found out about our relationship and beat the shit out of her, and then packed up their house overnight and moved her away from New Hampshire to California. And I never saw or spoke to her again. I thought I was going to die. That's what it felt like. Kids have big emotions. Trust me. I've got a 15 and a 17-year-old here at the house, and they have big, big emotions. Okay, let's see. TC Nerd says, just like the Corey Richards case, I would want to only consider facts if they come from other people. Has Mel interviewed Billy? Billy will not give an interview. No one's been able to interview Billy. I'm hoping that some of the bigger documentaries I've worked on have been able to get through the legal process to interview Billy. His lawyers will not allow him to speak with anyone. The only picture that has been taken that I know of Billy Flynn since he was released from prison is a picture where a reporter found out his address, walked down his driveway to ask him questions, and Bill held his hand up like this. And so literally this is the picture that I've seen of Bill since he's been out of prison. So I would love to, and I definitely tried to. I also reached out to Cecilia Pierce. I ended up speaking with one of her siblings. I did my due diligence. I tried to talk to everybody I could. I talked to Robert Fowler all the time. I'm hoping to talk to Raymond. Raymond did the documentary for Captivated, and Raymond, still lives with Robert. And I'm hoping that Raymond gave an interview for one of the big documentaries I worked on. But all these people are really scared. If Billy talks to any of us, or if he does anything that could ruin his parole, he goes back to prison. And he was in prison for 20 years. He went in 1991 and he got out in 2015. So he was in prison for 14, 15 years. But I will say Pete Randall and JR, they live in the houses they grew up in. They live right in Hampton. They live right down the road from Raymond. So they're there, and I have definitely tried to talk to them, but they are not willing to talk. All right, let's see. I don't think drugs were a factor either. Oh, sorry. Rob asked, were any of the charges against Smart related to the statutory? Could New Hampshire allow the hearing, but then bring those charged and just screw her over again? No, because I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but I don't think so, because there's a lot of layers to this. So if they were to bring those charges against her, she would have already had time served for that. So that would be moot anyway. The judge in her original case is no longer with us. Some of the witnesses are no longer with us. And I don't think the state of New Hampshire wants to try this case again, although that's what they're asking for. She's actually not asking for a commutation. She's not asking for a reduced sentence necessarily. She's actually asking for a new trial, which I don't think the state of New Hampshire is going to give her. So I don't know what they plan to do. But let's see. This was not a group of brain surgeons, New Hampshire woman said. Yeah. Including Pam. She was a dumbass. I mean, let's be fair. She was a dumbass too. And so was Greg. They were all kids. Can you imagine trying to be like going from being this like metalhead, like big hair band, just going to concerts and smoking pot and driving around and drinking beers and hanging out with your girl and all this stuff. And the next thing you know, your hair is cut, you're in a suit, and you're going to the office to help sell insurance, with your dad. Like, and then trying to make that work and trying to make a new marriage work. It's insane. I was a dumbass when I was 22, and it didn't get much better until I was in my 30s. At this point, the Sentencing Commission, they are trying to change the laws in this country so that anyone under the age of 25 cannot be convicted of life without the possibility of parole, because it is a harsh sentence. It basically is death. But it's worse than death, because the taxpayers have to keep paying for you to eat and be housed. And also, who knows how long you're going to live. And so you're just this suffering person that knows they're never going anywhere but inside, but this cage. So the Sentencing Project believes that this is akin to torture, and that people under the age of 25 should not be sentenced to life without parole, because our brains aren't fully developed until we're 25. So there's that. Let's see. Petty LaBelle, you went to high school with Junior's dad. I would love to talk to you. A few years ago, his dad, this is crazy. A few years ago, his dad tried, they still have the Schmurder weapon in the evidence for this case. And a few years ago, JR's dad tried to get it back. He was like, can I get that back? But now it's been like 30 years. Is everybody cool? Can I have it back? And they didn't give it to him. So, let's see. All right. Yeah. In Limon, I love your name, but I'm not pronouncing it right, and I know that because I want to say in Limone, but it's in Limonane. Yes, in New Hampshire, for criminal charges, prosecutors must typically file charges for statutory rape involving a minor within 22 years of the victim's 18th birthday. So we are well past that. Okay. Let's see. But I mean, at the end of the day, they could totally charge her with that, but she's already served 35 years. So, okay. Let's see. And she has actually, and Pam has been sued in civil court. Whenever we're talking about the John O'Keefe wrongful death suit that the O'Keefes are bringing against Karen Reed, I always think of O.J. Simpson first. And I always think of Pamela Smart because Greg Smart's family sued her civilly after the trial and they won. And so she's not allowed to make any money, basically. So she doesn't get any money for, like, anytime she talks to me, obviously, I don't pay people to do interviews with them. Because that would be unethical. But if she were to, like, if somebody was like, hey, Pam, let's write a book, I'll be your ghostwriter, she wouldn't be able to, mosquito. She wouldn't be able to make any money off of that. It would go directly to Greg's estate. So, yeah, bulkhead doors are common. A lot of people, when I first, my editor, Amber Hunt, was like, Mel, what is a bulkhead? I have no idea what you're talking about. I had to send her pictures. It's my bedroom as a child was in the basement. And so if I wanted to sneak out, I went out through the bulkhead because it was always unlocked. You lock the bulkhead from the inside. There's no lock on the outside, which does become important later on. Okay, let's see. Regular RN. Thank you so much for the $10. And thanks for saying that you love Something's Off. We love you too. Meredith would have been better off if she said just a bump. Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. His friend was doing it, so I had to. Okay. Yeah, please go listen to the first season. I really, really, really break it down, and I break it down like character by character that I'm telling you about. So I go into a little bit about Billy and Pete and JR and Raymond, and I interview a bunch of locals and the prosecutor and victims advocates and a bunch of people. So let's see. Okay. Is JR anonymous? Are those their initials for the legal reason, or is that's just what he was called? His name was Vance Latomy Jr. and everyone called him JR Jr. So, okay. Not bored at all. Okay, good. I'm not boring you guys. Grew up in Newburyport. Newburyport's one of my favorite places on the planet outside of Portsmouth. And Rebecca has been vacationing in Newburyport with her kids for like 10 years, I think. I love it. It's so beautiful. Whenever I would be coming in from Mass to New Hampshire and I would come over the bridge into Newburyport, I was like, yeah, sigh of relief. Okay. Let's see. Wait, like Greg's alleged affair. What? No. How is that victim blaming Greg? He had an affair. Pam was upset about it and got very insecure and then turned her attentions to Billy. I'm not blaming Greg for having an affair. People have affairs all the time, especially early 20-somethings who got married in their early 20s. People do it all the time. And I'm not making any excuses. I'm literally just giving you the facts. JMD said, I also thought she was a teacher. Yeah, Pam was only 22, petty. Let's see. Yeah, I agree with this, Old Line Red. I also think it's a position of trust that she violated, but I can listen to the rest with an open mind. I absolutely do too. She does too. I know that won't make you feel any better, but she understands that what she did was wrong. And one of the things that she said is like, if I had never had an inappropriate relationship with Bill, Greg would not have been killed. Greg would be alive. She knows that. She is the first to say, I should have never, ever gotten involved with a 16-year-old kid. How long between the Letourneau case and the Smart case? Let's see. Letourneau, I think that was probably within 5 or 10 years, maybe after that. I don't know. Yeah, and this was really important in the telling of the story that I was telling Allie because so the movie To Die For, Allie says the movie To Die For blew this story up. I still remember it, and I was 12 at the time. There were 2 films that were made about this story outside of the documentary that WMUR made. One of them was the Pamela Smart story, which starred Helen Hunt and Chad. I can't think of his name. He's in the video that I made in the beginning of this video. In To Die For, it was based on a book. And the woman who wrote the book, now I can't think of her name. Hold on, I got to figure out what her name is because she's really important to this story. She was a local author. She actually grew up right down the road from where I grew up. Who wrote To Die For? I why can't I think of her name? I've talked to her before. I've also talked to a gazillion people in this case. To Die For. So To Die For was the film that starred Nicole Kidman. It was loosely based on the Pamela Smart, Greg Smart story. Joyce Maynard, right? Joyce Maynard was a local author. She actually sat in the courthouse for the whole trial. She started writing the book during the trial. Her book was about a newscaster. Pam really wanted to be a media. She wanted to be a broadcaster. She wanted to be on the news, like telling us the news. And so she created this character loosely based on Pam. And I think most people, when they think about the Pam Smart case, that's what they think of. They think of that movie and that book. Joyce Maynard has since renounced what she did. I don't know how else to say it. She submitted a letter to the state of New Hampshire and said, I was a part of the media frenzy that mischaracterized basically who Pam Smart is. And I am sorry about my role in that. I've talked to her briefly. She doesn't want to go on record about it anymore because people ask her about it all the time. But she did submit a letter in one of the many petitions that Pam sent to the state of New Hampshire to try to get a commutation for her sentence. So Joyce Maynard, who wrote To Die For, which is how most people know this case, has actually been like, yeah, I was part of the problem. I did this to her. It was crazy. The media coverage, Heather says the media coverage was brutal. It was absolutely brutal on this case. I have a giant fly in here. Okay, let's see. I don't know about the Trial by Media documentary series that was 3 years ago. My podcast came out in 2024, so I don't know if that's what you were thinking of, but I don't know about maybe there was one. I don't know. Now I'm curious of who's the one that can't be named. Does anyone know? I can't tell you. There are a lot of people that can't be named in this. People that, well, I'll get into it in a little bit. Okay. Let me see if there's anything else. Yeah. Me, Old Line Red, as a Gen Xer who was allowed to be interested in wildly inappropriate subjects like crime at a young age. I read Helter Skelter at 13 and Small Sacrifices, Diane Downs at 14. That was me. Whenever I went to the pharmacy with my grandmother, I would buy true crime books. One of the first true crime books I read was the story of Gia Karanji. I don't know if you all remember the movie with Angelina Jolie in it. She played the model Gia. I was obsessed with Gia. So I read that one. That one wasn't really true crime because it was more about the AIDS epidemic and overdosing and things like that. But I also read Helter Skelter when I was about your age. And I read anything I could get my hands on like this. I've been invested in true crime for a long time, but I didn't understand how I could that would manifest for me until I got here where I am with you guys. Let's see. The prosecutor has to know how stupid he sounded when he said that, right? You would think. I spent a lot of my conversation with Paul Maggiato going, come on, Paul. that was my response to a lot of things he said. I would be like, Paul, come on. Come on, dude. Yeah, Allie says Jason Baldwin didn't want to take the Alford plea, but Eccles was on death row, so he finally decided. Yeah, nobody wants to take an Alford plea. Who wants to say they're guilty of a crime that they didn't commit? And to me, anybody who is unwilling to take an Alford plea, there's something to that. There's got to be something to that. You don't allow yourself to continue to suffer if there's a way out of the suffering. You know what I mean? Even if it takes a hit to your ego, or even if it makes people look at you differently. If you are a caged animal, which is what most people in prison feel like, having this opportunity to be on the outside just by just saying a lie, a small lie, I didn't do this, or I did do this, and if that will satisfy you, you'll let me out. But if someone's unwilling to take an Alford plea, I believe them. That's kind of what it comes down to for me. Let's see. Yeah, you recognize the state has enough evidence to convict you. It's a tool to thwart civil lawsuits against states. You are absolutely right about this, and I did not do a great job explaining it. Make Mine in Mini says, Alford plea is you don't admit to guilt, but you recognize the state has enough evidence to convict you. It's a tool to thwart civil lawsuits against the states. Yes. Okay. Oh, this is interesting. a mixed girl in a mixed up world. I've lived in this town most of my life. I knew a close friend of Greg's. I will never forget how devastated he was. It pisses me off. All the guys are out. The two that murdered Greg should be in prison. I agree. I agree. And one of Greg's friends actually plays a huge part in this story, which we'll get to in just a moment once we get into the trial. I am really far behind. Doesn't Billy have a lifetime parole or something crazy like that? He probably wants to keep his nose clean. Yes. I don't know if he has a lifetime parole, but I do know that he has been told to keep his nose clean. Not only did Billy get out of prison, Billy was the person who testified that he is the one who pulled the trigger. I don't totally believe that. And I'll explain why, but later. Billy is the one who actually pulled the trigger and was the main person who planned this. And not only was Billy out of prison in 2015, I believe it was 5 years prior to that, he was allowed work release. So Billy Flynn was actually leaving the prison every day and going and working in the town in Maine where he was imprisoned, which is where he met his wife. He got married before he left prison, and they now live together and they're married. But so Billy's prison sentence was only about 10 years long for this brutal, heinous murder. Okay. Okay, let's see. My husband just said Greg's never getting out. No one should or should have. Denise, this is a sentiment I hear all the time. Oftentimes I hear, why is she allowed to have another hearing? Greg doesn't get to have a hearing. Why is she not dying in prison? Greg, isn't alive. And blah, blah, blah. I understand the sentiment. I really do. But this is a human being that we're talking about who is alive, who is living a death sentence, if that makes sense. And once I tell you a little bit more about the sentencing, I don't know if that will help make sense, or if it's something that you can talk to your husband about, or if he'll continue just believing what he does. But the sentence plays a big role in this case. So, okay. Make Mine and a Mini says LWOP, which is life without parole, also means you are not eligible for many programs like continuing education while incarcerated. Luckily for Pam, that is not true in her case. She actually has 4 degrees, I think, at this point. She is a minister. She has a law degree. She has a bachelor, master's. I think she might have, I don't know if she has a PhD, but she has a bunch of degrees. She's super smart. She also has helped a lot of people in prison. And she also has jobs waiting for her if she ever gets out, working for prison reform. The ex-warden of Bedford Hills Correctional Facility, where she is in upstate New York, was the warden for, I think, 15 years of Pam's sentence. She too wrote a letter to the state of New Hampshire and said that Pam should not be in prison anymore. And that she spent a decade plus living with and working with Pam in the prison, and that Pam should no longer be in prison. So when a warden is telling you that, and corrections officers are telling you that, and the woman who wrote the book about you is telling you that, I think you have to think about it. That's what I say. I think you have to think about it. But unfortunately, in the state of New Hampshire, no matter how long the petition is, and no matter how many letters are signed by senators, congresspeople, ex-wardens, artists in the community, locals in the community, law enforcement, everybody, the state of New Hampshire gives each of her petitions about 3 minutes of their time, and they just ship it out the door. They don't even give it a second thought, which is unfair in my opinion. Okay. Let's see. Okay, I am going to go back to the story here. So, oh wait, that's not true. I got a couple more. Yeah. Being in solitary confinement like Eccles was is pretty persuasive as far as taking a plea goes, Science and Sass says. I agree. And I think that's why most people do it. Pam was in solitary for, I think in the past 30 years, she's been in solitary for almost 100 days. And that was before the United Nations said that anything longer than 15 days is akin to human torture. So she was tortured while she was in prison in many different ways, which we'll get into. Mama Bomb 115, thanks for the $2, said, Mel, did you read the Jeffrey McDonald story? I have not. feel free to tell me about it. You can email somethingsoffpod@gmail.com if you want to tell me about it, or send me links on the Facebook group. We're always open to hearing about stories, so let me know. Let's see. Okay, this is really great. Lindsay, I love you. Thank you. Do people realize that in other countries, they don't imprison everyone forever, even for murder? People are redeemable most of the time. Imagine that. People can change. People can be redeemed. People can, well, what's prison for? What is prison for? It's to make better choices, to change your life, to do better, be better, be introspective, try to be a better person, try to help other people. If someone is proving that they're doing that, and that they're not a violent person, I mean, does anybody okay, let me ask you this question. I'm going to poll the audience. Does anybody in the audience think that if Pam Smart got out of prison tomorrow at age 57, that she would murder someone else? Do you think that she would do that? That's what she's accused of. She's accused of accomplice to murder, accomplice to first-degree murder. Do you think that if she got out of prison tomorrow, she would go and become an accomplice to another murder, or that she would do one herself? Because if the answer to that is no, then why are we paying to hold her in prison? I mean, that's just one of the reasons. Okay, let's see. Okay, Denise, I talked to you. In Limonene, yes, the governor of New Hampshire has the constitutional authority to grant pardon, but Governor Kelly Ayotte expressly rejected Pamela Smart's pardon and sentence reduction request in May of 2025. Here's something that's really interesting about that quote in Limonene. Pam wasn't applying for a pardon. She was applying for a commutation. The governor, Kelly Ayotte, didn't even know what she was reading or what she was looking at. Pam is not asking for a pardon. She was asking for a commutation of her sentence, meaning let's look at this sentence and see if it actually fits the crime. And if the time has been served, can we take the parole part of it off? Can we just say, serving life with the possibility of parole? That's what Pam's always asked for. So when Kelly Ayotte came out with this quote in response to her previous petition, which was, 2024, I think was the last time Pam petitioned. You have to petition to the governor and the governor's council in New Hampshire. So when she petitioned, she does it every, I think, 2 or 3 years. She petitions and she gets all of these documents together. All of these people write letters, and they say why she should no longer be in prison and that her sentence should be reduced or changed. This was the last one. And Kelly Ayotte, who was a prosecutor, by the way, should know the difference between a pardon request and a commutation petition. And the fact that she doesn't, and the fact that that's the quote, that's what she said, tells me everything I need to know about the state of New Hampshire. Luckily, Pam is not petitioning the governor or the governor's council in this case. She's actually making a legal argument. She is filing a petition in the courts. So we'll see. I don't know. The arguments are strong, in my opinion, partly because I did the investigation and found some of this new evidence. So I feel really strongly about it, but, okay. I think, okay, I'm going to get back to the story. So where I left off was the boys, Ralph and JR's parents went to the police station. They brought in the murder weapon. They said, we think that Billy and Pete and JR and Raymond had something to do with this. Please go investigate further. Shortly thereafter, the boys were arrested. Immediately, the prosecutors, Maggiato, and the investigators started putting pressure on the boys. And the boys, they weren't telling the truth. They were scared, but they weren't, they weren't telling them anything that they could use. In the meantime, Pete and Billy's moms were so freaked out that their sons were being accused of this heinous unaliving of Greg Smart, that they thought the best thing that they could do in the moment was to take all of the evidence that the boys brought home with them, like their backpacks that had clothing and evidence of the burglary and everything in them, and they got rid of them. So Billy's mom, they have no idea where that evidence went because she got rid of it. Pete's mom also got rid of his backpack. They have no idea where that evidence went. Neither one of their moms were charged with any crimes, however, because the police and Maggiato used their moms against the boys. Meaning, if you don't tell us the truth, if you don't tell us you killed Greg Smart, we're going to arrest your mom. So that was the tactic that was started there. And keep in mind, Billy was 16 at the time. I think Pete was 18 at the time. Raymond was 19, and JR I think was 17. They were scattered in age. The police put all of the boys in prison, in jail, in holding together. So Billy and JR shared a cell. Pete was next to them. And for some reason, I think it was because Raymond wasn't cooperating, they wanted Raymond to say that Pam was responsible for planning this, and he refused to say that. So they separated Raymond. They put him on the other side of the prison, or on the other side of the jail. So the boys are being held. They are working out plea deals. None of the boys are flipping. They're actually in juvie for a while. So they're all in juvie. JR, Pete, and Billy are all hanging out together, and they're talking about their cases, which you're not supposed to do. And while they're in jail, while they're in juvie, they're writing letters to their girlfriends. Billy was writing to a girlfriend. JR was writing to a girlfriend. Pete was writing to a girlfriend. Billy, in his letters, is saying things like, they want me to say that Pam did this, and I'm not going to do that because Pam will hate me. They want me to say Pam will do this. I'm going to have to protect my boys. I'm going to have to say Pam did this. I don't want to. He walked right up to the line of saying she didn't do this, right? Pete and JR were doing the same things. They were talking about, Pam, and being like, yeah, they're telling us we have to flip on her, and if we don't, we're going to get the death penalty. So at 16, 18, 19, the prosecutors, Maggiato, and the investigators were using the death penalty and their mothers being charged with crimes to get these boys to plead out. They hadn't pled out yet, though. So because the cops were getting nervous that the boys wouldn't plead, they went and got Cecilia Pierce. And what they did was, Cecilia Pierce was 15 at the time. They got Cecilia Pierce and they said, listen, we know you tried to help them find the murder weapon. If you don't agree to cooperate, if you don't cooperate with us and wear a wire in your conversations with Pam Smart, then we are going to charge you with the same crimes that we're charging the boys with because you helped them. And of course, she's 15. She's freaking out. Her mother was just letting her go into the room with the investigators, and she wasn't even in there with her most of the time. So they're just putting half of the paperwork is actually signed by Cecilia Pierce at 15 years old. So they were like, you're going to have to help us out. And if you don't, and Cecilia was like being a dick. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I've seen some of the interrogation, and she's like sitting there with her arms crossed, and she's like, what? She has this attitude. Cecilia's always had an attitude. She had an attitude on the stand. She didn't give a fuck. At this point in time, though, Cecilia's being approached by Hollywood production companies to tell her story. She gets paid $1,000 to go on hard copy. She gets paid, I think it ended up being $10,000 as like a holder fee for $150,000 documentary budget. I have the paperwork for that. That's fascinating to me. She got paid to do all these media appearances. So think like Jen McCabe is all I can think of when I hear that. So anyway, the police start putting pressure on her. They start putting pressure on her. They're like, okay, this is what we need you to do, Cecilia. We need you to do this wiretap for us because we have been hearing that Pam Smart is involved in this. That the wife did it. The wife was responsible for planning this, and that she made the boys kill Greg Smart. And Cecilia wouldn't say that that was the case. I'm not sure Cecilia ever said that was the case until she got to the stand. But she did eventually agree to wear a wire because she was being threatened with what the boys were being threatened with, which is the death penalty or, life in prison, her parents getting in trouble, their parents getting in trouble, all these people getting in trouble. So the only thing they had at that point in time that connected Pam Smart to this case was the call, the witness, Cindy Butt, saying that Cecilia a couple months before, had said to her, my friend Pam wants her husband Greg killed. And I don't want to go down to any kind of conspiracy theories or rabbit holes, but one of the things that I was investigating is Cindy Butt, because Cindy Butt is not her real name. Well, that's not true. Cindy Butt is the name she was using. I'll say that. Cindy Butt is another person who the police manipulated, is the only way that I can think of how to explain it. Cindy Butt, her real name was something else, and I'm not going to say her real name because I don't want to say someone's name if I haven't completely verified with them that this is true. Cindy Butt was in trouble for welfare fraud, and the police needed her to testify because she was one of the only people that could say, I heard this from outside the group, that this is what was going to happen. And so they, from what I understand, pressured her to testify because they were trying to charge her with welfare fraud. She wouldn't do it under her real name. So she came to court. She testified under the name Cindy Butt. Cindy Butt is in the record. Cindy Butt is not her real name. If they had used her real name, the defense would have found out that she was being charged. She might be charged with welfare fraud, and then they could impeach her. They were not allowed to impeach Cindy Butt because they didn't know her real name. So that's just one of the little side stories that kind of plays into this. So they had this tip that was like, look at the wife did it, that kind of thing. The other thing they had was that JR had the speakers that had been in Greg's car. So after Greg passed away, after Greg was murdered, Pam sold the speakers that were in Greg's car to JR. Let me think about what else they had on her. I don't know. Off the top of my head, let me see. Let me look at my notes really quickly. Hold on. I don't want to miss anything here. I don't want to tell the wrong story. Hold on. Okay. Rumors begin circulating in the hallways of Winnicott. Anonymous tip led police to 15-year-old student Cecilia Pierce. It was anonymous, and then it wasn't. That was Cindy Butt. And then Ralph Welch overheard Bill. Yes. Yeah, that's really all they had. Anyway, okay, so the police are like, okay, Cecilia, we need you to wear this wiretap with whenever you talk to Pam, because Cecilia and Pam were still really good friends. I'm going to tell you the way the story played out, and then I'm going to tell you the testimony and how that played into it in a moment. So Cecilia puts on a wire. She wore the wire 3 times for them. Actually, I take that back. They did a phone tap twice, and then she wore a wire. On the phone tap, they had this weird, it's called a cup. It was like a cupping thing where they had to, it was in the 1990s, or 1991. So they had to get the phone call. They had to connect this cup device to the receiver of the phone. That cup would then record into a separate device onto a mini cassette tape. And so they recorded these 2 conversations with Cecilia and Pam. And there was nothing incriminating. Cecilia could not get her to say, yeah, I did this. She would say things like, I can't believe Bill did this. Do you know anything? Pam was starting to get freaked out because the police weren't telling her anything about her husband's murder. The other thing that they had on Pam, I just remembered, she bought a new car with the insurance money. The insurance money ended up being, I think, $75,000. And I think they tried to use that against her. But the interesting thing about it was that Pam didn't even know there was an insurance policy. And she also didn't know how much it was because Greg worked on commission. So his insurance policy was based on his commissions. So there would be no way for her to know how much money she was going to get from the insurance, when that money, if there was even insurance policy. When she found out there was, she used the money to pack up and get out of the condo and get an apartment for herself, put some furniture in it, and she bought a car. They used that against her. So she would talk about that kind of stuff. She would be, she would talk about, have you talked to Bill? Like, what do you know what's going on? Why did they do this? That kind of stuff. That was the first 2 phone taps. The third happened on July 13th, 1991. And they were like, okay, the phone cups aren't working. We're going to have to put a wire on you, Cecilia. So we need you to go to Pam's office and act like you're there to talk to her about we want you to tell her you're nervous because the cops are coming to you and they're saying that you're in trouble, meaning Cecilia's in trouble and that she helped Bill. Now, keep in mind that Cecilia had a major crush on Bill, which is why I think she helped him try to find the weapon. I don't think it had anything to do with Pam or anything like that. I think she loved Bill and she probably was a little jealous of Pam. And so she wanted to help Bill in whatever he needed, all the way down to if she has to pick a side in the end and the police are saying she's going to be charged like the boys are and her parents are going to be in trouble, she's not going to pick Pam's side. She's going to pick Billy's side because those are her people. Those are her friends. Sorry, hold on a second. I just really need to wet my whistle. Okay, so this third wiretap is the one that they're just like, huzzah, it happened. On the tape, it is, okay, so the way that this was set up, they put this wire on Cecilia. They follow with a surveillance van to Pam's office parking lot and a patrol car, an unmarked car, sorry, I should say, to Pam's parking lot. Cecilia comes in her car and goes out, goes inside, talks to the Pam's secretary. And then she comes out because Pam's not there. And so she kind of waits in the parking lot. Pam shows up. At that point in time, the surveillance van loses reception to the wire, but they have a backup in the unmarked car where they can hear what's happening. So it's playing through basically a speaker, like the CB, like the breaker 19 kind of thing. The wire is playing through that speaker. So Detective Pelletier, who was the lead investigator on the case, pulls out one of those large box recording devices, and he holds it up to the speaker and records the conversation. And they can barely hear what they're saying. And they still don't know what they have, even after they get the tapes and they listen to them themselves. They have no idea what the two women are saying on them. They just know that it sounds like Pam is saying something incriminating. So from there, Detective Pelletier drives these tapes, all the tapes, including the phone taps, drives them to Rhode Island to meet with an ex-FBI investigator who is an audio forensics person. So he's an audiologist. And there they try to enhance the tapes. They spend days doing this. They try days to enhance the tapes. They get what they feel is like good enough, I guess. And they take those tapes back. They put them into evidence. Maggiato then asks for the tapes to be transcribed. And those tapes are transcribed by someone. To this day, nobody knows who, but someone. And what they think they're hearing on the tapes is that Pam is saying things like, if Billy had just done this 2 weeks earlier, blah 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 blah. If you had talked Bill out of it or something like that. That would be from Cecilia. Anyway, tapes are they're pretty much inaudible, but they have transcripts of them. And then because of that, they arrest Pam Smart. They arrested her on August 1st, 1990. And then she goes to prison and she goes to jail and she awaits trial. In the process of this, they're telling the boys that they're going to, they feel strongly about this case against Pam. The boys end up taking a plea, and then eventually Billy does flip on Pam and says, yeah, she's the one who made me do this. She's the one who planned it. She made me do it. And so now they have a main witness. They have Cecilia Pierce with the wiretaps, and they have Pam Smart in jail awaiting trial. It goes to trial. Maybe I'll stop right here for a second and we'll take some questions and then we'll come back to it. So how long has it been? It's been like an hour and a half. Okay, let's do that. Everybody okay? Need a break? I'm surprised I haven't had to pee yet. Okay, I don't know what everyone's saying no about, but I'm gonna go back and look. No, not at all. Hard no. Is there a standard for sentencing in New Hampshire now versus when she was sentenced? And is there case law showing sentencing guidelines due to their proximity to the murder? That is a great question, Tara, and I am going to get into it in just a moment, I promise. The sentencing is a huge part of the current case. It's one of the points of the habeas. So we'll get into it in just a minute, I promise. Let's see. Let's see. Oh, no, you guys were answering my question. Yeah, no, yeah. You don't think that she would kill somebody. I don't either. I mean, I've known her for over a decade. It's not happening. It's not happening. Let's see. Bye, Rob. Sorry I didn't get to see you leave. Thanks for being here. Now I'm triggered when I hear petitioning activity. Me too, Liz. Okay. In Canada, Joy W in Canada says, in Canada, the highest sentence is 25 years, then a parole hearing. Doesn't mean everyone gets parole, but they have a hearing. Some never get out justifiably. And I completely agree with that. If you're going to unalive somebody, you should get at least 25 years. And then you should have to, like, okay, I always say this because I feel like it puts it in perspective. I'm going to say it to you all. Probably some of you have heard me say it before. Pamela Smart, who never murdered anyone, she never pulled the trigger, she never physically murdered anyone, is serving life without the possibility of parole. Charles Manson was given parole. Some of the women in Charles Manson's cult who actually brutally, physically unalived people by stabbing them multiple times have been paroled. They may be in their 70s, but they have been paroled. Pam doesn't have the option that Charles Manson had. Sit with that for a second. Does that make sense to you? It never made sense to me. When I heard that, when I figured that part of it out, I think when I was a kid, I didn't understand I didn't understand sentencing. We understood that she had been found guilty, but the sentencing until I saw that documentary when I was in my late 30s, I didn't realize she had no possibility for parole. Crazy. Okay. So, let me get through a couple more comments and then we'll get back to pretrial stuff. Cecilia definitely had a vibe. She sure did, Allie. That was a ton of money. Can you imagine being 15 years old and making like $3,000 to go be on hard copy or inside edition, or getting $10,000 for the rights to your story? It wasn't even her story. That's the crazy thing. She sold her rights for like $10,000. Allegedly. Let's see. Did she choose the last name? But no, I believe she was in a relationship with somebody and that was their last name. And I think she was possibly going to marry that person eventually. So she started using that name to get around the charges that were coming for the welfare fraud, or that might come or might not come for the welfare fraud. A list of the law enforcement names might make more sense with hindsight. I can tell you Pelletier, he's the most famous one because he does all the documentaries. If anybody does a documentary about Pam Smart and they want one of the investigators or one of the cops that was involved, Pelletier's your guy. He's the guy who is famous because he always says the line that he said to Pam when he arrested her, which was like, his line is, I've got some good news and I've got some bad news for you. We found the murderer of your husband. The bad news is you're under arrest. And he always says it. Like, if you ask him, he'll say it. It's sad. It's so sad. Everybody became a celebrity in this case, including the judge, who famously from the bench said that he hoped that Clint Eastwood would play him in the movie. I'm sorry. Hold on. I got one little text coming in. I got to check. What happened here? Oh, Lindsay sends me the sweetest messages, y'all. I'm lucky. I'm so lucky. And then she sends me pictures of vibrators. Amazing. Okay. I don't want to get into conspiracy theories, but yes. Okay. Oh, see you later, TC Nerd. Thanks for being here. Thanks for asking tough questions. I appreciate you. Okay. Tara, Thanks for the $10, Tara. I appreciate that. Said, listen to Mel's pod on this. Excellent, Mel. You should be super proud of the work you've done for the case. Sunlight is said to be the best of disinfectants. Thanks for coming on tonight. Thank you for saying that. And thanks for being here. And thanks for the $10. It really helps everything. I'm going to New Hampshire on Monday and I got to get there. And so, whatever money I can scrounge up between now and then will help me get to New Hampshire. We're driving up on Saturday. I hope I get to see some of my family members. I'm definitely going to be with Miss Rebecca Lavoie and Matt and some documentary filmmakers who are coming up with us, which I'm really excited about. So anyway, thank you so much. I appreciate you, Tara. Okay, let's see. Like a red Solo cup. I assume that you're talking about evidence collection there. Yes. Okay, let's see. Yeah, I think then the answer to the poll was no. She would not kill anybody after she got out. Okay, if you watch the doc, Smashy said, Mel, I watched the doc on Hulu and it was great. Also, your high school pics are adorable. That's really funny that you said that. Thank you for noticing my high school pics that are in the documentary. That yellow sweater, though, you guys, that mustard yellow sweater. I'm so mad that I let them do that to me. Ugh, I looked awful. I didn't like the way I looked in the documentary, but I feel passionate about this. I think you guys know that, so I can talk about it. I want to help people understand the nuances of it. I do think that in most cases there are nuances that we do need to pay attention to, and this is definitely one of those cases. There were some pretty huge constitutional violations in this trial. Okay. This is great, Mel. We need regular Real Talk with Mel episodes. I'm open to it. Obviously, this week we did a double on Monday. We did Tuesday, Wednesday this morning. I'm doing a double today, tomorrow, Friday, Monday. We're a little swamped right now, but this is something that I'm considering doing is just coming on and chatting with you guys. I really love it. So we're working on it. Oh, this is a great point, Ray of Sunshine. Charles Manson is also a man. That's got to be part of it for these people. The Sentencing Project did a lot of research. If you have time, go to the Sentencing Project. I think it's sentencingproject.org. Go to their website, look at some of the research they've done on life sentences and life without parole sentences and the death penalty cases. Women in violent crimes, women are charged so much higher than men are for some reason. They really, really, really want to punish women. And that's what they were doing here. They definitely made an example out of her. And they didn't like her attitude. They didn't like that she was upset and mad and she wanted to know about her case and she wanted to know who killed her husband and she was asking questions and she looked stern sometimes and she didn't cry when they wanted her to cry and her hair was too nice and she had a bow in her hair and yeah. Anyway. Okay. I hated the sweater so hard. I did. I hated it. I know New Hampshire is going to be vacation for you, but would you and Rebecca consider coming on here for a second when we're going to. It's actually not vacation. I'm the only reason I'm going there is to work. One of the promises I made to Pam, I've never gone to prison to meet Pam. I could easily. A lot of people do. Documentaries, people go there all the time. Matt goes to see her. People who she's been talking to for decades go and see her. I told her a very long time ago that I wasn't going to go visit her in prison. I didn't want to meet her until she was out. Because to me, I feel like if I went to see this person in prison, who I wholeheartedly believe should not be in prison any longer, leaving that person in prison would be so painful and hard for me that I would really have a hard time living with that. So I told her a long time ago that I wasn't going to visit her in prison. Also, prisons scare the fuck out of me. I mean, I spent like a night in jail in my life and I'll never do that again. Like I never want to be there again. I can't imagine being there for 35 years. So one of the reasons why I'm going to New Hampshire on Monday is because Pam was supposed to be there, which we'll get into in a minute. She was supposed to be transferred for the first time in 30 years from New York to New Hampshire to finally stand in a courtroom and face the state and her accusers. And the state really muddied up the waters on that one. So I originally had planned to go because I knew she was going to be there, and I always wanted to be at this hearing. This hearing is really important to me. I feel very connected to this hearing and the habeas personally. So, oh, Liz, thanks so much for the tip. Appreciate you. So the plan was to go. So Lindsay and I are going to drive up on Saturday, but it is a work trip. I will have probably Sunday to maybe see some family and friends. Monday, I'm going to be in court at, well, probably starting at 8. And Rebecca's going to be in court in Boston for Turtle Boy starting at 8 or 9. And we have a plan once we are both done with court for the day that we're going to either get together in person or wherever we are. We're going to come on and talk to you guys. I'm also going to try to stream from the courtroom if I can. I applied for my media pass, and as far as I know, it's open to the public. And if I get my pass, I'll be able to, stream from my phone or my computer. So that's what I'm hoping to do. Pam does know about Karen's case. She's also like, she's well read, and she pays attention to all the other cases. Like the Menendez case is she talks about it all the time because she feels like, I think because she's a woman, like there's a huge swath of the population that feels sorry for the Menendez brothers. I'm one of those people. I think that what they did was heinous. It was horrific. But again, they were children who were being severely abused. And there was no way out for them. And that's the choice they made in their adolescent brains. And it wasn't the right choice, but they have served their time. That's my thoughts. You guys might not agree with that. I would suggest you going and watching the most recent documentaries that have come out about their father, who was a monster. And I'm not sorry he's dead. I'll just say that. But I think it's hard because everyone hates Pam. I say that with almost no hyperbole. You guys here, there's a little over 200 of you here. Some of you probably hate her. Most of you are like, hey, this is really great. We don't think she should be in prison. She might have done it, but we don't think she should be in prison. Outside of this, the majority of what Pam Smart gets is daily death threats. People loathe this woman, especially people in New Hampshire. And it's sad to me, but it is what it is. There's nothing I can do. I'm trying to do something about it. But anyway, okay. I think I got through everything. Let's get back to the story. We are going into the trial. So Pam has lawyers. She has Mark Sisti and Paul Toomey. They are at that time, and still to this day, Mark Sisti is one of the best criminal defense attorneys you can get. And so, Pam came from an affluent family. Her dad was a pilot. John, he sadly passed away this year. Luckily I got to see him 2 weeks before he passed away. Pam was not allowed to speak with him. Like she wasn't allowed to see him. She wasn't allowed a video conference with her dad on his deathbed, which Pam's mom is also she's vibrant and she's amazing. Linda's amazing, but she is starting to, she does have early onset dementia. So Pam's really worried about that. And Pam's main goal is to get out of prison so she can go take care of her mom. Her mom has been her biggest supporter and warrior for Pam for 35 years. To this day, Linda she sent me a message today and was like, thank you for going to the hearing for us. Like, thank you. She doesn't have to do that. She pays attention. She fights hard. She has put herself in front of committees in New Hampshire. She has chased down politicians to ask them to look at her daughter's case. She's done everything a parent could do. And all Pam wants to do is get out of prison and go take care of her mom. And I hope that someday she does get to do that before it's too late. Okay. So we are going into trial. Pam's family was able to come up with some money to pay for these attorneys, but they were very expensive, and there were 2 of them. And they were fighting the state. And the state had pretty compelling evidence in the wiretaps, as far as they understood it. They were invited to the DA's office to listen to the wiretaps and to read the transcripts. And in that point in time, they didn't know what the process was to get to that place. They didn't know how the wiretaps were created and how the transcripts were created. They just knew that that's the evidence that the prosecution was presenting, and it had been accepted by the judge, and that was the evidence against her. And I think that Paul and Mark were scared of that evidence. And it didn't help Pam's case. So we go to trial. I'm only going to tell you a couple of pieces of the testimony that I think are important. One of the main questions I get is, but Mel, if she's on tape saying she did it, which she's not actually, if she's on tape saying she did it, then how can you say she's not guilty? First of all, I don't often answer the question of whether I think she's guilty or not, because at this point I think it's not important. I think if she was guilty, she has served her time. If she is not guilty, she has served her time. It's about the time for me. So, but the question I get always is, how do you explain away these tapes? And for me, there have been two things that always stuck out to me. And when I started pulling the thread of one of these things, that's when these doors opened up, and I'll tell you where we are now. The first thing that has never made any sense to me about the tapes is that Pam knew that Cecilia was wearing a wire. And the reason I know she knew is because there was testimony about it. Testimony from Pam and testimony from Greg Smart's best friend, Brian Washburn. There would have been 3 people testifying to that had Brian's girlfriend Tracy testified as well, but the prosecution didn't call her. But Tracy did sign an affidavit saying that just several days before the first phone taps happened, Pam had come to their apartment to hang out, and to just, she was freaking out. They said she was chaotic. She was shaking. She was out of breath. You know, she was still dealing with not knowing who had killed her husband and all this stuff. Brian Washburn testified in court that Pam came to them and told them, I can't get any information out of the police. I can't get any information out of anybody. Cecilia keeps dropping hints that she knows more than I know. And my lawyers just told me that she's going to be wearing a wire when she talks to me. Anytime she talks to me, she's going to be wearing a wire. Do you think if I act like I know something, that I can get some information out of her that will help the police figure out if Billy or whoever killed Greg? She said that to Greg Smart's best friend, who went to trial and testified on her behalf, that she said that to him. And his girlfriend, who also heard her say that, filled out an affidavit that said that Pam knew she was going to be wired, and that she was basically, and this is me paraphrasing, was entrapping Cecilia by pretending to know the plan. Because she was saying, Cecilia is coming to me and she's saying, they asked me they want me to, the cops want me to tell them about going to find a weapon for Billy. And I'm going, what weapon? I'm talking in Pam's voice. So Cecilia was like, oh, they arrested the boys. Cecilia was like, oh, they have the murder weapon. Cecilia was like, oh, they found fingerprints. Do you think those fingerprints might be mine? So this is something that one of the threads that I tried to pull that I couldn't get a concrete answer on, but I do think it's important to talk about it. And it involves the bulkhead. So as I mentioned to you before, Cecilia and Billy came to stay with Pam for about a week while Greg was out of town. That was the first time that Pam and Billy engaged in sexual acts while Cecilia was in the living room hanging out, watching a movie. So Cecilia and Billy's fingerprints should have been all over Pam's condo, right? Part of the prosecution's theory of the case to pin Pam for the accomplice charge, the planning of the murder, was that she left the bulkhead door unlocked so that Billy could get in and make it look like there had been a burglary. There was a latent print, as far as I understand it, found on the inside locking mechanism of the bulkhead door, which could not be identified. On the tapes, in one of the garbled parts of the tape, Cecilia says something like, they found my fingerprints on that thing. So my question has always been, whose fingerprint was on the locking mechanism of the bulkhead door? Because whoever's fingerprint, unless it was Pam's or Greg's, because they lived there, if it was neither one of their fingerprints, it was unidentified, then whoever whoever's fingerprint was on that bulkhead locking mechanism is more than likely the person who unlocked the door. And the person who could have unlocked the door would have been the person who was obsessed with Billy Flynn and jealous that they were upstairs having sex and wanted to be more significant, wanted to be a bigger part of Billy's world. So one of the things that I've posited, and this is obviously a hypothesis on my part, but I am bothered by the fact that there was an unidentified print on that locking mechanism, and I couldn't get Maggiato to answer it. He said he'd never heard of that. He said, why would they even test the prints on the bulkhead door? No, I don't know where the fingerprints are. No, I don't know why they're in the files. So there's a little thread to pull there, and it's sort of my white whale of this case. I need to figure it out. But it's a theory that I have. So those are the kind of things that Cecilia was saying. They found my fingerprint on that thing. So what they have against Pamela Smart, the only piece of evidence, the only piece of physical evidence they have against Pamela Smart is these wiretaps, which she told Greg Smart's best friend, I know I'm being wiretapped. Do you think that if I tell Cecilia that I know what the plan was, that she will open up and give me the information I need so I can take it to the police? So basically, I'm going to entrap her. And they were like, don't be a fucking idiot, basically. Don't do that. And Pam didn't listen to them, and she did it. And that's the only piece of evidence they had against her. They had Billy testifying against her. They had Cecilia testifying against her. They had Pete testifying against her. JR testifying against her. Raymond never testified. He was just actually put in jail. He was charged separately and put in jail, kept away from everybody. And then, what else was it? They had the FBI audiologist guy. They had Pelletier. And they had these wiretaps, and they had the transcripts. And here's the part that I pulled. This is the part that I started asking questions about. This is the other part of the wiretaps that really bothered me, because I have the wiretaps. They played the wiretaps in court. Nobody could understand anything. Pam's wearing headphones. The jurors are wearing headphones. Greg's dad is sitting in the audience wearing headphones, listening to these wiretaps. Greg's dad, in the middle of listening to them, stands up and goes, I can't hear these goddamn things, or whatever, paraphrasing. No one could understand what was on the wiretaps. They were only able to actually introduce, I think it was one of the tapes even, into evidence, because the other two were so garbled you couldn't hear anything on them. So the one tape that they entered into evidence was played in court for the jury, and the judge couldn't understand what was being said. Pam didn't even know if it was her speaking or Cecilia. She had no idea. So that happens. The tapes go back with the jury as evidence, right? And here's the judge's instruction. He says to the jury, you will have access to the wiretaps. You will also have access to the transcripts. The transcripts, however, jury, are not evidence. They are only a guide. So if you're listening to the tapes and you can't understand what's being said and you need to check out the transcripts to figure out what's being said, you can do that. But just know that if you really can't understand what's being said, you have to go with what your brain tells you is on the tape, not the transcripts. So that happened. So I have the tapes. I have the transcripts. I start listening to the tapes. I hear these moments where she's saying things that are like, if Billy had done it 2 weeks earlier or something like that. If Cecilia, if you tell the truth, you're going to put all of us in jail. You're going to put me, you're going to put Bill, you're going to put Pete, you're going to put JR, you're going to put us all in the slammer. That's one of the things that everybody is like, oh, there it is. Maggiato really sold these tapes to the jury. He took portions of the transcripts and he blew them up on giant whiteboards and he put them in front of the jury. And I thought, yeah, like, how do you fight that as a defense attorney? Like, what do you do? You know? So I started listening to the tapes and then I enhanced them myself. I cleared things up a little bit. And then I took the transcripts and I started comparing the transcripts to the wiretaps. And just a few seconds in, I found something that was not right. There was a word that was wrong. And then I found an entire sentence that was wrong. And then I found words on the transcript that were never on the tape, or vice versa. And then I found 8 pages of notes of inconsistencies and errors in the transcripts that were not on the wiretaps. And when I asked Maggiato in my interview with him, who made the transcripts, he said, oh, some secretary in the DA's office. And I said, well, who? What's her name? I don't know. It's been 35 years. Why is her name not on the transcript? Why didn't you get a certified transcriber to do the transcripts? What why would we need a certified transcriber? Nobody certifies transcripts. So you don't know who transcribed these. Yeah, it was a secretary in the office. Okay. Was the secretary a trained audiologist? Could the secretary hear the tapes better than anyone else, including the judge or the jury or Pamela Smart or her lawyers or even you guys, in order to write these transcripts? Well, the transcripts match the tapes. So I was like, oh, okay. So there's this one moment in the closing arguments where he's got this big whiteboard in front of the jury, and he's saying, see, right here, she's saying she did it. This is her basically confessing. And he points at Pamela Smart, that woman, these are her words. This is what she's saying. He is using he's using a transcript that is not evidence and he did a great job. He convinced the jury, obviously. But I thought there's something wrong there. So I contacted a certified transcriber and I said, can you do this? And he was like, I can barely make out anything that they're saying. And I'm like, yeah, I know. So that didn't work. But he did say that for all, prosecutors, they send us the tapes, we certify them. They don't get entered into the record unless they say they are stamped certified. There wasn't a name. No, who knows? Maggiato could have done it. Pelletier could have done it. A secretary could have done it. His niece or nephew or kid could have done it. Who knows? Who knows? If you ask him the question, he'll say, what does it matter? And here's why it matters. Because I think you all know that if you hear something, if you can't understand what a person is saying in audio and tape, but you are given something to read along, if you read it, you can hear it. So if what you're reading is going into your brain and it's also infecting your ears, what you're reading on the page becomes the truth, not what's on the tape. And so when I started asking those questions, the first thing I did was I reached out to Marion Davidson, who's at Loyola. And she's a professor of cognitive and confirmation bias. That's what she teaches. She's a PhD in it. And I said, I don't know if you know this case, but let me explain to you what I've discovered. And can you walk me through if confirmation bias would play a role here? And as soon as I started telling her about it, she went, get the fuck out of here. Are you fucking kidding me? That was like her response on the phone. And I was like, oh shit, I love this lady. Anyway, at the end of our conversation, she was like, this is utter bullshit. And if you can send me the wiretaps and the transcripts, I'd like to actually get my students together and do a study specifically on this case. And I was like, fuck yeah. So I contacted Matt, the lawyer, and I said, hey, this is what's going on. I think I found the issue, the argument with these tapes. And he was blown away and he was like, let's do it. And so we sent everything off to Marion. It took a long time. Not going to lie. We were all just sitting there like, oh God, what's going to happen? A study is being done. Like a study is being done specifically for this case, which would be used good or bad. Like it's going to be good or bad. And we have to accept it. Right. Pam had to accept it. Marion does the study. It comes back 9 months later, I think. And we get the results, and the results are exactly what I thought they were. A jury cannot look at those transcripts and separate from. They create the story in their head based on what's on the paper. You cannot put that toothpaste back in the tube. So once that happened, and we went, okay, that's actually like a constitutional rights violation here. This was presented as evidence, even though the judge said it wasn't evidence, it was still presented to the jury, and the jury was able to use it to make a decision on the only piece of evidence that put this person away for life without parole. And so we started building on that, and we started talking about a bunch of other things. And then a few other things came up. One of the other things that came up in my research was Linda, Pam's mom, has kept every single piece of paper that has ever been filed on Pam's behalf, letters, everything. She's got an entire garage that are just boxes stacked to the ceiling of paper on this case. So Matt, Pam's attorney, basically sent an assistant down to Florida, and he got all the boxes out of the garage and he sent them off to a digitizing place. And they digitized, I think it ended up being, I don't even know, 100,000 pages, something like that, something crazy like that. And so they were all digitized. And then he said, have at it, Mel. I was like, yes. So I finally was able to dig in and like look for things, you know? And what I came across was a picture of a mini cassette, so like one of those little mini cassette recorder tapes. And attached to it, I found an interview that was on that tape, but I found the transcript of the interview, and the interview was with a juror. Her name was Charlotte Jeffs. She was the oldest woman on the jury. In Pam's previous appeals, she's brought up a few things. Basically, juror misconduct is a big one on this case because of all the media. The jury they couldn't not know about it. It's sort of like picking a jury for Karen Reed. Everyone knew about this Pamela Smart case across the globe. So it was really difficult to pick a jury, but they did. The judge chose not to sequester the jury, which was a huge mistake. The judge also chose not to allow the defense to, like, they requested a change of venue. He denied that. So they tried it in this little courthouse in Exeter, and the whole world showed up. And the jurors thought they were celebrities, so they were running their mouths. There were three major instances of juror misconduct in the case. These all failed on appeal, but I'm going to tell you about them anyway. One of them was, and why can't I think of his name right now? It doesn't matter what his name is. A juror during the trial was heard. This is so fucked up, actually. There was a juror during the trial. I want you to think of this in Karen Reed terms, actually. A juror during the trial was at a local bar, just drunk and openly talking about Pam Smart's guilty and blah, blah, blah in the middle of the trial, right? Somebody at the bar calls Pam Smart's mom at 10 o'clock at night and says, you got to get the lawyers down here. You got to get the judge on the phone, the cops, somebody. There's a guy down here talking about your daughter's case. He's on the jury, blah, blah, blah. So Linda immediately calls the cops. She calls the lawyer. She does everything she's supposed to do. At this point in time, Linda and John had their own phones recorded because they were getting so many death threats. They needed to keep giving those to the police and being like, okay, this person called us at 1 o'clock in the morning and threatened our lives. Here's the recording of it, right? So they have this recorded call from this guy calling from the bar. And the cops, they present it to the judge, is all I understand, is how I understand it. Somewhere along the line, though, the judge decided that Linda Wojcik, Pam's mom, was lying about this call, because the only call log they had for 10 o'clock was 10 a.m. There was no call at 10 p.m. So they thought Linda was lying. Turns out the cops just put an A instead of a P on the log. So I don't know if that was on purpose. I don't know if it was a Scrivener's error. I'm not really sure, but the call didn't show as logged at 10 p.m. So the judge does bring the juror in and is like, hey, you can't do that, Sonny. You can't go out there talking about the case. And the guy was like, oh, sorry, judge. And then he sent him on his merry way, and there was no issues, of course. The second one was Charlotte Jeffs, who I just mentioned a moment ago. Charlotte Jeffs was the oldest woman on the jury. She in the jury pool. So the pool before they're picked, before voir dire, before all that. Charlotte Jeffs is in the jury pool openly being like, this woman's a slut. Pam Smart's guilty. I don't care. I hope I get on this jury. That motherfucker, she's guilty. Blah, 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 blah. You know, in the jury pool. She gets reported to the judge. The judge goes, hey, you can't do that. They pick her for the jury. She continues to talk shit in the jury room and everywhere about Pam Smart. Nothing happens to her. And the third one, the most famous one, is Karen Sicard. We call her Juror 13. Karen Sicard, jurors are told they're not allowed to take their notes home with them. They're not allowed to talk to anybody, read newspapers, blah, blah, blah. So Karen thought that she was sort of doing the right thing by every night she would go home. she would go take a bubble bath at her house. And while she was in the bubble bath, she would record her thoughts about the trial. So there are tape recordings of Karen Sicard's thoughts about the trial. And honestly, Karen Sicard kind of is in line with the way that I think about this trial. And I think a lot of people think about it. She was she thought Bill was lying. She thought Pete was lying. She thought he was a violent asshole. She thought JR was lying. She thought Cecilia was awful. And she was like, Pam knew that she was being wiretapped. So, I mean, the tapes sound, I guess, kind of incriminating, but she knew she was being wiretapped. So I don't know. I'm probably going to hang this jury. And then, we gets to jury deliberations, and Karen Sicard is like, they convinced me because of the transcripts, blah, blah, blah. So the next tape is of Karen being like, oh my God, they just sentenced her. We had no idea it was life without parole. Everyone in the jury room is crying. We don't know what to do with ourselves. Had I known that it was life without parole, I would have hung this jury, blah, 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 blah. All on tape. I've heard the tapes. After the trial, it is brought to the judge's attention. He disregards it again. And then the appellate lawyers, the appellate attorneys that Pam hired directly after the conviction royally screwed the whole thing up. They found out about the Karen Sicard tapes because Karen was talking about it because she wanted to write a book, much like Becky from Alec Murdoch. So there were rumors about town. One of her neighbors, she talked to one of her neighbors, like at the grocery store, like at the Demoulas Market Basket, about wanting to sell. Rage Knitter said, you want to stop saying mother effer. I know. It's so hard for me. Thanks for the $2. I appreciate you. I'll try. I will try. Oh, and right. I also want to stop saying it because it's like super racist. You're totally right. Thanks for reminding me. Okay. So Karen Sicard's talking about these tapes. She wants to write a book. She wants to make some money because she doesn't have a lot of money. She wants to make some money off of these tapes. And the neighbors let Pam's new lawyers know that Karen's out here talking about selling these tapes. So Karen's appellate lawyers set up a buy from Karen Sicard. And I don't know the logistics of it, but I know that they set up a buy. Karen Sicard shows up to sell the tapes to them. And when she shows up, they say to her, this is unethical. I can't believe you're doing this. And then it goes in front of a judge. The judge completely dismisses Pam's appeal because he basically cancels the other one out. He says, you lawyers are being sketch as fuck. And Karen, you shouldn't be selling these tapes and trying to make money off of them. You're both in the wrong. I'm canceling you out. Dismissed. So Pam kind of got screwed on that one. Anyway, going back to Charlotte Jeffs, the interview that I found in the hundreds of thousands of pages that Linda had in her garage. There's an interview with Charlotte Jeffs. It happens in 2001. So it would have been 9 years after Pam was already in prison. And this reporter, who was working at the time for Justice Magazine. I am not allowed to say her name because she threatened to have me sued by the Wall Street Journal legal department because that's where she is now, a reporter. Interviewed Charlotte on like the 10-year anniversary of the trial. And in the interview, this is complicated, so I'm going to try to explain it as best as I can. In the interview, Charlotte Jeffs says, why the reporter says, why did you convict Pam Smart? And Charlotte Jeffs, just like she did in the jury pool, because she was a murdering bitch, blah, 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 blah. And I knew she was going to do it again. She'd already tried to kill that other person. And I thought, wait, what are we talking about here? And so basically, and then Charlotte goes on to say, and the reporter says, how do you know that? Where did you hear that? And she's like, I read it in, she doesn't name the publication, but I've discovered later that it was the Boston Globe and a California newspaper had reported, this is so complicated, Pam Smart was being held in jail prior to trial, and a jailhouse informant who was trying to get her sentence reduced told the guards that Pam Smart was trying to have her friend's husband killed if he didn't get Cecilia Pierce to flip. Okay. Does that make sense? I feel like I should stop and say that again. A woman in jail with Pam ratted, snitched, whatever, went to the prison, the officers, and said, hey, Pam Smart is trying to have this woman's husband killed because he is refusing to lie for her and to get Cecilia Pierce to flip. And that turned into Pam Smart is trying to have Cecilia Pierce killed because she won't lie on the stand. This matter was fully investigated and was not true. However, it leaked to the press. And so, of course, the Boston Globe and other publications ran with these stories. Pam Smart is in trouble. Pam Smart's trying to take a hit out on somebody else. Pam Smart's trying to have Cecilia Pierce killed. Pam Smart's doing this. Pam Smart's doing that. None of it came to fruition. It never came up in court. The only thing that ever came up in court was this kid testified and said that Pam was like threatening his stepdad, not with death or anything. Just, I don't even know. He didn't even know what he was talking about. He wasn't even solid. He wasn't even like, I don't know what I'm talking about. The article was about Pam threatening to kill Cecilia. And so these publications, they ran with it because the story was so popular at the time. And Charlotte Jeffs read it while on the jury in trial that Pam was trying to have somebody else killed, specifically Cecilia. And that is why she convicted Pam Smart. So I was like, like my mind just went, wait a minute. This woman who had already been brought up in front of this judge for jury misconduct is admitting in an audio record, in a taped interview with a transcript, an actual transcript and a taped interview that you can actually hear. And she's saying that she convicted Pam Smart because she read in an article, which she's not supposed to do, a story that wasn't real. And that's what she used to convict Pam Smart. And I was like, how do I prove this? So I found the reporter. And when I found her phone number, that was the hardest part. I found her old boss. I found the old company she worked for, no longer in business. I found a producer at like NBC News who knew her. I found all these people. I found her cell phone number. And just randomly, I was like, fuck it. I'll call her. I call and she answered. And I couldn't believe she answered. And I asked if I was speaking with her. And she said yes. And I told her who I was and what I was working on. And my thought was, she's going to be like, oh, yeah, totally. I absolutely did that interview. I remember. Yeah, I remember Pam Smart. Her response, I don't know what you're talking about. Who's Pam Smart? What are you talking about? Why are you asking me about this person, Pam Smart? She like feigned ignorance about who Pam Smart was. And I was like, I was so blown away. I almost got off the phone. And then I thought, I'm going to tell her the entire story again. And I was like, so what I have here is I have files that I have a mini cassette tape that has your name on it. Her name was written on the mini cassette tape. And I have a transcript to go with this interview that you did. And the transcript has your name on it and your notes. And she was like, I don't know what you're talking about. None of this sounds familiar to me. I have no idea what you're talking about, blah, blah. And I was like, okay. I was like, well, I have your do you think you could identify your handwriting? And I didn't have her notes. What I had Linda's notes. And so I texted her while I was on the phone with her. I take that back. I texted her when I got off the phone with her. She denied ever knowing what I was talking about. She almost denied even knowing who Pam Smart was and the story, or Charlotte Jeffs. And then she threatened me with legal action if I mentioned her name or talked about her at all in my podcast. I hate to tell her, she's probably going to get subpoenaed, but so I didn't do that. I did tell the story, but I didn't I talk about her. I didn't say her name, and I'm not saying her name now, and I won't say her name. So after we get off the phone, I text her a picture of the notes, and she immediately goes, "No, that's not me. See, you have the wrong information." And I was like, "Oh, okay." I was like, "Well, here's the micro cassette." And I send her a picture of the micro cassette, and it has her name on it. And she pauses, and the three dots come up, and they sit there for like 3 minutes. And I'm like, doo, 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 doo. And then finally she goes, "Yeah, that's my that's my name, and that's my handwriting, and that I'm pretty sure that was the tape. Those were the tapes I used." And I was like, "Thank you." Anyway, so this has become a point of the habeas. So far we have 2 points of the habeas. One point is the confirmation cognitive bias study, which is like actually scientific. They're like numbers, and I'm like, well, I don't know what any of these numbers mean, but I know what the conclusion says. So that's one. That's like the main point of the habeas petition that Matt just filed for Pam, which I've talked about before. Bug. And then the Charlotte Jeffs point is also a really good point. And then there are 3 other points in the habeas, and I want to talk about them briefly. They're sort of the easiest ones, and I've been talking about sentencing for a long time. The crux of this case lies in the sentencing for me. So finally, I started looking at all the other sort of parts of what was happening. I started analyzing closing arguments. I started analyzing, what the lawyers were doing. And I found another juror. I was looking for more juror misconduct because there were 3 out of 12. So I figured if there were 3 out of 12, there had to be more. I found another juror who actually did 2 weeks after the trial, he wrote this in-depth article for the Boston Globe. He got paid for it. I think he got paid like $10,000 to write it. And in the article, this juror says he was talking about their process and what they were doing in deliberations and all this stuff. And he says, yeah, so we had to look at the witness intimidation charge because they were trying to charge her with intimidating Cecilia Pierce. And he's like, we didn't even bother discussing the witness intimidation charge because her lawyer had already told us she was guilty in his closing argument. And I was like, what? And I was like, that can't be right. And so I go back and I listen to Paul Toomey's closing argument. And sure as fuck, he says to the jury, he's like, we don't even need to, I'm paraphrasing, we don't even need to really talk about this whole witness intimidation charge. I mean, that's pretty good to go. We understand, So basically what they had done is they were giving the jury this like lesser included, the same way that Karen, the OUI charge, like give the jury something to hang their hats on. So they were giving the jury this witness intimidation charge to hang their hats on. Paul Toomey tells the jury that his client is guilty of witness intimidation. Pam Smart has never, ever admitted to witness intimidation. She has never said she was guilty of witness intimidation, and she did not agree to that. And that's the point. That's the problem. So when I told Matt about it, because Matt only knew about this case in the past 2 years. He actually didn't know anything about the case. Like one of the reasons why Matt and I work together is because I have this like encyclopedia in my brain about this case. So if he has a question, I can be like, okay, this is who said that, and this is where you can find what, and blah, blah, blah. So that's how we sort of work together. So when I called Matt, I said, hey, Matt, is an attorney allowed to tell the jury their client is guilty of something? And he was like, no. And I was like, because Pam's attorney did. And he was like, what the hell? What are you talking about? So we both go back and we look at the tape. We listen to the words. And Matt is like, you got to be fucking kidding me. So we start looking into it. And here is the crazy thing. Not only did Paul Toomey, and I said this the other day, I think I mentioned it on the pod actually. Not only did Paul Toomey tell the jury that his client was guilty of witness intimidation, 1 year later, after Pamela Smart was convicted, Paul Toomey represented a client named Anaya in the case of Anaya against the state of New Hampshire, Supreme Court. It was a Supreme Court case. Anaya was convicted of first degree, I think it was. And in closing arguments, his attorney told the jury that he was guilty of a specific part of the charge, which Anaya never agreed to. He never told his lawyer that was okay to do. And his lawyer was doing that because he didn't want Anaya to get life without or the death penalty, whatever was on the table. He was trying to get him a lesser sentence. So he was trying to do the right thing. But unfortunately, he told the jury his client was guilty. Anaya appealed on that, on ineffective assistance of counsel, it went to the state Supreme Court, and the state Supreme Court ruled that Anaya was right and that his lawyer was wrong. And the lawyer that represented Anaya at the Supreme Court was none other than Paul Toomey, who represented Pamela Smart a year before and did the exact same thing that Anaya's attorney did to him in the trial a year before. I can't make this shit up. It's a I believe it's the Sixth Amendment. I believe it's her Sixth Amendment right was violated there. And a court case a year later, a state Supreme Court case said, you cannot do this. And Paul Toomey is the one who argued that you can't do it, and he had just done it. You can't make it up. Anyway, that's point 3. Point 4 are the jury instructions. This is the part where Matt would be better to explain this. I will give you a sort of the cliff notes as I understand it. Basically, the judge instructed the jury. He didn't instruct the jury properly on the accomplice to first degree murder charge and how that works. So, not to get too technical, but Billy Flynn was never charged with first degree. He was charged with second degree because he took a plea deal. The only way that you can be charged with first degree in the state of New Hampshire is if you basically act in the same exact way as and with means and motive as the person who actually committed the crime. Pam Smart is convicted of accomplice to first degree murder. The court is saying there was no first degree murder because Bill Flynn got second degree murder. So it's a weaker point, but it's still, I think, pretty strong. I mean, you can't, he didn't tell the jury the right thing. He didn't tell them what they should be choosing. I mean, and you all know, going through the first trial with Pamela Smart and the issues with the jury slip and all that stuff, the verdict slip. You got to be clear and concise. These are confusing. This is confusing shit for lay people. So that's the 4th point. The 5th point is the one that I have, since I heard the sentence, thought that can't be. And I didn't know how to figure it out until I started investigating it. And here's what I will say about that. Pamela Smart was found guilty by a jury of her peers of first degree, accomplice to first degree murder and witness intimidation. When she was sentenced, I just told you guys about Karen Sakar, juror 13, being like, we couldn't believe that this was happening. We couldn't believe that's what she was sentenced to. I wouldn't have done that if I had known, right? So it hit everybody really hard, except for me and probably my family, because we didn't even pay attention to the sentencing phase. We just thought, good, she's guilty. She's going away for the rest of her life, right? Pam Smart was sentenced, and in the sentencing, the judge looked at her, and I use his words all the time. I use his audio all the time because it is factually incorrect. The judge was wrong. No one questioned him for 35 years about it until we figured out that he was wrong. The judge says to Pamela Smart, I am here, I'm not going to quote it exactly, but this is basically what he says. I am hereby mandated by the state of New Hampshire to sentence you to a life without parole for the crime of accomplice to first degree murder. Judge Gray was not mandated by the state of New Hampshire to sentence her or anyone to life without parole for the crime of accomplice to first degree murder. The statute, it's one word. It's one word. It's may versus shall, or it's, I think you guys have probably heard like Peter Trago say this, or maybe Brother Counsel. When you see the word shall, it is absolute. This statute does not say that. It does not say shall. It is up to the judge's discretion. So when he told Pamela Smart and her lawyers and the world that he was mandated to sentence her to a life without parole for accomplice to first degree murder, he was wrong. And nobody questioned it because a judge said it. So at the end of the day, if you want to disregard everything against her, if you want to disregard if you want her to be in prison because she sexually assaulted a minor, if you want her to be in prison because you think that she lied, if you want her to be in prison because you think she planned the unaliving of her husband, fine. You can have that. What you can't have is that no one in the state of New Hampshire is mandated to sentence this woman to life without parole for accomplice to first degree murder. And yet she was, and yet she is. So when I figured that part out, I cried. I feel like I'm going to cry right now. Sorry. Sorry. I want you to put yourself in Karen Reed's shoes, and I want you to put yourself in Pamela Smart's shoes. You did a horrible thing. I'm not saying Karen Reed did a horrible thing. Pam did a horrible thing. She was wrapped up in this. She was arrogant. She was 22 years old and crazy and an asshole and wanted fame and all kinds of shit. And she did the wrong thing. And she statutorily raped a 16-year-old kid. And let's say you did that. Let's say you really lost your mind and you fucked up. Let's say you fucked up majorly. Let's say you were driving drunk and you hit somebody and you killed them. And let's say the sentence for that, look at Karen Reed. Had Karen Reed been convicted, it would have been manslaughter or second degree. Those do not carry life without parole sentences. They carry a life sentence. Maybe they carry 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. What I know is that Bill Flynn served about 10 years of a sentence for what should have been first degree, but ended up being second degree murder. Cecilia Pierce, who helped find the murder weapon, never spent a day in jail. Billy Flynn's mother, who destroyed evidence, never spent a day in jail. Pete Randall's mother, who destroyed evidence, never spent a day in jail. And if you were in the situation where you had done something so reckless and so stupid, look at Chris Albert, who has been living his life after killing somebody. And you were in her shoes, and that judge said to you, I am mandated to sentence you to life without the possibility of parole. And you thought, this is the rest of my life, and this is just the way it is because a judge said it to me. Imagine if you found out 35 years later, that judge was never mandated to sentence to you to that. There was no rule. There was no law. There was no legal verbiage. There was nothing on the books that said that he was mandated to do that. How would you feel? What if that was your sister or your cousin or your brother or your kid? Like Linda Wojcic's kid. That's where I stand. So, I'm going to go back up. I'm going to take a minute to compose myself, if you don't mind. And I'm going to go back up and look at some of these comments. And if you guys have any further questions, if anything's like you can't make sense of it in your brain or something I said doesn't make sense, ask me. I will try to explain if I can. If I miss something, if you know something that I don't know, let me know. Okay, let me go back. Sorry for getting emotional. Yeah, the hearing on the motion to dismiss has been scheduled for 9 a.m. Monday at Merrimack Superior Court. So where we are right now in the process, Matt filed the petition. It had those 5 points that I just laid out for you. From what I hear from him, the state of New Hampshire filed their response wanting to dismiss. They had really shitty arguments that didn't even touch what Matt said. Matt came back with an even better response to it that was even grounded more in fact. And we have gotten to the place now where a judge has to step in basically and decide if this is going to move forward. Pam was supposed to appear in person. She is now going to appear via WebEx. This will be the first time I think her face is it going to be in a New Hampshire courtroom in 30 plus years. And And I think that I'm really happy she's got a hearing finally. The next step is if it goes forward, if the judge decides that it can move forward, I believe the next step is an evidentiary hearing. And in that evidentiary hearing, Matt and his team are going to have to lay out all the evidence that we've found. So the reporter and Charlotte Jeffs, the statutes, the Marion is going to have to take the stand and she's going to have to explain the study she did. Witnesses are going to be subpoenaed. All of that is going to happen at an evidentiary hearing, and then they decide if they're going to do another trial. I personally don't think if it gets to that point, the state of New Hampshire is going to be like, no, we can't try this again. Half the people are dead. The judge isn't alive. She served her time. Like at some point, the state of New Hampshire is going to have to do the right thing. And to me, what it feels like is they made a decision. This is sort of like, let's pin it on the girl. We're not going to go back from that. The state of New Hampshire 35 years ago made a decision. They decided they had the right person. They decided that this was Pam Smart's fault. And they will not go back from that because they cannot admit that they made any mistakes. I got that when I talked to Paul Maggiato. He cannot admit mistakes. I do not know who the secretary is who created those transcripts. No one knows. If you're that secretary, please reach out to me. Please. If you know the secretary, reach out to me, please. I have done my due diligence in trying to find you, and I have not been able to find you. So Monday, 9 a.m., Merrimack Superior Court in Concord. I will be there. There's going to be a couple of documentarians there. Matt will be there, obviously. And I hope that some people will show up and see how this process plays out. And I hope New Hampshire does the right thing. I don't have a lot of hope. They've done a lot of shady shit over the years. The first thing they did was ship her off to New York. And they did it in the dead of night. They blacked out the windows of a van so she didn't know where she was going. They took her out of her bed. They put her in a van. They drove her 5 hours away from her home. They didn't tell her parents they were moving her. And they put her in a maximum security prison in upstate New York, where two weeks later, after arriving in upstate New York, she was beaten so badly by other prisoners that they broke her face. She has a metal plate in her face. She's since been sexually assaulted and raped by officers in the prison who stole pictures of her and sold them to the National Enquirer for $25,000. Pam sued them and won in court. She sued them from prison and won a defamation case in court. And all the while, she has rehabilitated herself from whatever mistake she made when she was 22 years old. I personally think she's a good person. She may have done some shitty things. She may have ultimately been responsible for the death of her husband. But that was 35 years ago. And I think that she has rehabilitated herself and she would actually be helpful to our society if she were out. So there's that. Ray of Sunshine said, off topic, but someone just knocked on my door and I almost said out loud, hold on, somebody's at my door, like we were on FaceTime, LOL. That's what this entire live has felt like. I guess that's a good thing. Is that a good thing? I don't know. Is that a good thing? Okay, let's see. All right. Yes, Smashy, please go listen to the podcast. Pretty much a lot of what I've said tonight. I mean, we've been on for 2.5 hours. It was the Cliff Notes version of it, but there's a lot of information in there. I have a lot more stuff that I actually wasn't able to put out or couldn't put out that I'm hoping to someday put out. But anytime I have updates about Pam, I try to get them out there and deal with all the haters for a little while and hope that, I can talk sense to some people and that the numbers will build. It freaks me out that people don't care about this, I think. So, okay. Witness intimidation, I do say, Allie. Matt, this is really a sweet comment, Jody. Matt must be so happy you exist. I'm happy Matt exists. Matt's the first attorney I think that she's had who understands how to get in and fight and understands how to be scrappy. He's young. He works really hard for a living for people who don't have a ton of money. And he does it not out of the goodness of his heart, but he does it because he believes in our constitutional rights and justice. And when he heard about this case, he couldn't not take it on. And I really commend him for that. So I'm glad that we were able to meet. I'm glad we're friends now. And I'm glad that he didn't go into this blind, that he did have somebody who could talk him through some of the people and the stories and the things that happened, you know? I'll never forget. I'll share this one moment with you guys. So one of the things that I did when I was doing the podcast is I traveled to New Hampshire. I lived in Boston up until 4 years ago. So I did a lot of my research while I was there, but it wasn't until I got here and I started working on the podcast that I got access to a lot more stuff so that I could make those stories that I knew start to fall into place. One of the things I discovered is I was able to go to New Hampshire and I was able to go to the court, Rockingham, and I was able to sit down and physically look at the court file. So it was, it was thousands of pages and I literally paged through every page. And I recorded some of my thoughts. I recorded some of the things I was seeing. I will never forget when I flipped open one of those file folders and I got to a stack of handwritten letters that were Billy, Pete, and JR's letters from juvie to girlfriends and letters from prison. And I started flipping through them and I came to one of Billy's letters and I flipped a page and right in the middle of the page, there was a swastika. And then I realized that he had turned all of his O's into swastikas. And it made me think of like the comment from earlier when people were like, oh, so now you're like disparaging victims. And I'm telling you what I learned and the facts. I can't help the fact that a 16, 17-year-old boy who shot someone in the head was also a white supremacist. That's his bad character flaw, not mine. And that's his mindset, not mine. And those were the things that like viscerally, had I known that when I was a kid, I would have thought differently about this case. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, I don't know where that thought came from, but I just wanted to share it. Yes, Joy. No wonder I invoke Pam Smart's name so often with all this information. I do, because so many things remind me of her. When I heard about the Amanda Knox case, I immediately thought of Pam Smart. When I hear about Menendez, I immediately think of Pam Smart. When I heard the reason why I got invested in Karen Reed's case is because I was working on the podcast for Pam. And I was like, oh no, we're doing this again. We're doing this again. And I really was like worried that we were going to be going down the same route that we had gone down with Pam. And I'm so glad that it turned out the way it did. But we're still in these battles where she's still trying to prove that she didn't do this thing when 2 juries have acquitted her, basically. I think despite the look on my face, I think the mottos are familiar. I know that Bob, I think he retweeted one of my tweets earlier about this. I'm sure they're familiar with it, but no, I have not had a chance to sit down and talk with them about it. They're invested in like the Richard Allen. I think the Richard Allen case for them is like the Pam Smart case for me. So we both have those like crazy things going on in our brain at the same time. And it's hard. Allie, I appreciate you saying this because I do think that people think this is the Twilight Zone when I start talking about it. Allie said, we step into the Twilight Zone sometimes, I swear. This is completely logical, not hard to explain at all. You said it perfectly. I wish I had been her lawyer. I wish this 2 hour and 42-minute stream, I wish I had been able to present this to the jury. If you had been sitting on a jury and listening to this story, what would you do? All it has to be is reasonable doubt. You can't tell me that those jurors, like Karen Sakar, juror 13, she had so much reasonable doubt and she was convinced otherwise by the lead juror, the guy who wrote the article for the Boston Globe. And it sucks, it sucks. Yeah, I've heard this too, Joy. Lawyers say jury instruction mistakes are most successful appeal points. And I feel like we have 2. The judge was awful in this case. He was condescending. He was an asshole. And when I get fired up about judges, it's because of this guy. This guy was my intro to shitty judges. He's an asshole. And you know, he made jokes at the expense of this woman's life and Greg Smart's life, like joking in front of the jury. Like, I hope, you know, I hope Clint Eastwood plays me in the movie. What he on the very last day, here was one other little tidbit I'll share with you. On the very last day of jury deliberations, the jury deliberated for a few days. I think it might have been 7 days. Like I said, they weren't sequestered, but the judge was getting impatient with them, not coming up with a decision. So he walked into the jury room and he said, "You guys have until 5 o'clock to come up with something. And if you don't come up with something by 5 o'clock, I'm sequestering you," as a threat. And they didn't have an answer by 5 o'clock. And so he sequestered them for the last day of jury deliberations. And that was something that just sent some of them over the edge. They were done. The next day they came in and they said guilty. That has been on an appeal before. And the idea that, here's another crazy thing. I just thought about this. Pamela Smart's first appeal, her first appeal went to the same judge. The judge had to decide on his own misconduct. What do you think he did? Yeah. Okay. The name of the judge was Judge Gray, Gray. It should have been, yeah, Smashy. It should have been accomplice to second degree. It wasn't. Let's see. Thanks, Smashy. Allie said, "I don't think she did it, but they certainly did not have enough to convict, period. Love you so much, Mel. That's a heavy burden, despite what good has come from it." I appreciate you saying that. And like, this is why I say I don't care anymore if she is guilty or not guilty of planning this. She says she's not guilty of planning it. Somebody asked earlier, didn't she take responsibility in 2024? Mark Sisti, who represented her in her trial, the first trial, the guy with the ponytail, he continued to represent her until 2024. And he made this weird decision in 2024 on the eve of her last petition of commutation, where he wanted to do this PR campaign, where he wanted to put her in front of camera and say, you know, you have to take responsibility as much as you can. And he went around telling everyone she had taken responsibility for the planning of Greg's murder. But that's not what Pam said. Pam took responsibility for having the inappropriate sexual relationship with Billy that led to Greg's murder. She, to this day, denies wholeheartedly, 100% emphatically, she had nothing to do with the planning of Greg Smart, the planning of the murder of Greg Smart. So whether you believe her or not on that one, I don't really care anymore. She served her time. That's the end result for me. Her mother in Limonene, her mother is such a lovely human being. If you want to do something good in the world, send a message to Linda Wojcik on Facebook and tell her that you have heard about her daughter's case and you're hoping for the best, something like that. If you can send those messages to Linda, it gives her so much hope, and it makes her so happy to hear that people believe, because for 35 years, Linda's been the only one to believe in her daughter. And I hate that, you know. So if you guys want to do anything, write to Pam. If you want to write to Pam, you can find her through the Securus system. She's in Bedford Hills Correctional Facility. She responds. She's really well spoken. She loves to talk to people. If you want to write to Pam, you can do that. If you want to write to Linda, find her on Facebook. She's great. And tell her you said hi to me and that you heard Pam's story. I am Martha. The doc that I was in here, I'll post it in the comments. Hold on. It's on the Facebook. I'm sorry if I'm freezing up. I'm going to a different tab. Let's see. It's in. Oh, I clicked on the wrong thing. Sorry, guys. It's getting late. I've already been on for like 5 hours today. Okay. Mal. Okay. Can someone confirm? I don't know why I can't find this. Okay, hold on. Let me find it for you guys. It's the Nightline episode. Pamela Smart. It's called The Widow and the Wiretap. It's on Hulu, so you do have to have Hulu to watch it. It's one of my favorites. It's one of my favorite documentaries that's been done on the case. Honestly, they did a really great job. They covered the what's happening now, the habeas. And they had what's her name? The crazy one. What's the crazy true crime lady? The one who's crazy about like oh my god, I'm losing all of my words now. This is the combination of being exhausted and menopause. Nancy Grace. Nancy Grace is in it. So I'm in a documentary with Nancy Grace. I love that little trivia. Did I put it in the chat? I think I did. That was Cruel Punishment. I was devastated when I heard that she couldn't do a video call with her dying father to say goodbye. I'm like, what are we doing? What are we doing in this country? She couldn't get approved. She was trying to get it approved before he died, and she couldn't get it approved. Okay. Let's see. I'm sorry if I made you guys cry. I really didn't mean to cry. That kind of came on suddenly, and I didn't expect it. So, Dumpster Fire Show. Thanks for the $5. I'm late and confused. Didn't Pam Smart get with a kid and do away with her hubby? Did they get it wrong and she didn't do that? Definitely go back to the beginning and listen. But thanks for the $5. Hello. I'm still on. Do you want to say hi to my audience? This is Lindsay, everybody. I'm wrapping up here soon. Yeah, sorry. Let's see. Oh, sorry. Everybody's crying. I'm sorry. Let's see. He was not mandated, but he was a man. She was a woman. And just in case she was a lesbian, covered their bases. I don't know what you're saying. Okay. I don't know. You said something about it being a lesbian. I think they got it wrong after this show. I mean, I love to hear that. I hate that I have to try to convince people, you know? I don't know. But thank you for saying that. And now I have to call my mom and tell her about Pam Smart. That's usually what happens. It's like, oh my God, I got to go tell somebody about this, right? That's what I do. When Lindsay and I first met, she'd be like, what are you working on? What are you writing about? And I'm like, let me tell you about Pam Smart. And she's, so I'll never forget. Lindsay and I were driving in the car and Pam called me from prison. And it was the first time Lindsay had ever heard a call from jail. And I just remember the look on her face. She was sitting in the passenger seat like, there's a person calling us from prison who is accused of murder. Like, what the fuck is going on? Jody Williams has been a member for 6 months. OG. Mel, I love your passion and your big heart. Oh, thanks. I love your passion and your big heart right back at you. What's the podcast name? It's called the In Between Podcast with Mel Barrett. You can listen to it wherever you get them. Thank you. It actually, you know what, Allie, the In Between Podcast is award-winning level journalism, not just Pam's story either. I appreciate you saying that. The AP did name it a top 10. It was number 8 true crime podcasts of 2025, I think. So that was nice. Yeah, I can link the podcast. Hold on. I'm gonna just put the link. I'm just gonna put the link in the chat, but you guys are gonna have to go all the way back to the beginning. There's like 187 episodes, so, and most of it's something's off, but go all the way back to the beginning and you'll see the first episodes about Pam that I did. And please forgive some of the audio. It was the first, it was the first podcast I'd done. Member for 1 month, Dumpster Fire said, chat, just let me know to replay. Sounds intriguing. Good. I'm glad. I will update you from court. I'm going to actually try to stream from court. I'm going to try to stream live if they let me. And if they don't, as soon as I'm done, I will update. And then Rebecca and I are going to go on a little bit later, probably Monday night, to talk about Aiden's case and this case. Let's see. Yeah. I have to tell you, so Tara said, even if you just listen to the episode where they play the wiretaps and you hear what they think they have as gotcha evidence, it's crazy. It really was. And I just remember it was really late in the process. And I was like, I've got to deal with these wiretaps. And so I sat down and I listened to them, and I listened to them 7 times. And then I enhanced them and I listened to them. And then I started putting the transcripts next to each other. And I was just like, wait, they're saying she said don't. She said want, like things like that. I'm getting a tickle. It's probably time to end this. Okay. I'm going to put you on mute so I can cough. Sorry. Rage Knitter says, does it bother you when we say drink? It feels very cavalier now. No. I mean, I think maybe in the beginning, because people are like, oh, here goes Mel talking about Pam Smart again. You know, like it's that kind of thing. But it's if you guys listen and you look into it and you keep her name in your brain, then no, I think it's okay. I'm not worried about it. Pam is an evil person. My mom was incarcerated with her for years. I'm sorry to hear that. Maybe they just didn't get along. Because there are a lot of women who were incarcerated with her who say completely opposite. But I'm sorry that your mom had a bad experience with her. I'm sure there are people who think that of me too. Okay. Let's see. This definitely gives more context to your wariness of Gilday and others, Ellie said. Yeah. Like, I understand what Rebecca's saying. I understand, being even-handed and having having experiences with bad judges and just sort of coming to expect that. But this man who's no longer alive was responsible for putting this woman in prison for life without parole, and he made a mistake. So yeah, I hold judges to the highest standard. Of course I do. They are responsible for people's lives in some cases. Okay, let's see. Maybe not everyone, but I am people and I care. I'm glad that you care. Thank you. Okay. Well, this is a good question, Beach Life. What would the sentence have been if convicted on the right charge? Billy Flynn was convicted of second-degree murder. So if the sentence for second-degree murder was what Billy Flynn got, that's what Pam Smart should have got. If they ended up convicting her, she should have gotten what Billy got, which was, I think, 25 years with an option of parole after 15 maybe or 10. He was on work release. So he spent 15 years in prison. No, is that right? 25 years. He spent 25 years in prison. He was on work release 5 years prior. So he was out and working 5 years prior. So no, that's not right. 15. He got out in 15. He was sentenced in 90. Yeah, 25 years. So if it had been 25 years to life with the option of parole, she would have had 25 years to life with the option of parole. And Billy Flynn got out in 25 years. Pete Randall, I believe, got out in 25 years. J.R. Latomy got out in 7 or 8 years. J.R. Latomy is like living his life. He has like a passport now. He can do whatever the fuck he wants. He stole the gun and drove the getaway car. I'm just like, what are we doing in this country? What are we doing? Let's see. Off topic. Oh, Cassie. Off topic. You mentioned Amber Hunt. Why do I feel like I know her name? Amber Hunt is an amazing Pulitzer Prize winning journalist. She is one of the leaders over at Grab Bag Collab. Grab Bag Collab is the company that first took me on as a podcaster, and they are the ones who first aired my series, the In Between podcast. Amber is an amazing journalist. She is an amazing podcaster in her own right. And like I said, Pulitzer Prize winning journalist. She helped me edit the content of my scripts for the first season. I was talking about Amber the other day with it might have even been today. All the days are running together. But I was talking with Rebecca about Amber and saying that she was trying to like sort of hold my feet to the fire and keep this like journalism angle instead of like the emotional activism side of me. Because, Turtle Boy calls himself a journalist and an activist and a satirist. I have a hard time being just a journalist and not also being an activist. So Amber tries to keep me on the journalism side of things. She's amazing and I love her and I appreciate her. And she helped me get the story out into the world, and I will forever be grateful. Oh, you guys are all so sweet about Lindsay. Allie. Mel, can you and Missy possibly connect to see about working out a way to get her to the hearing? She's Sandra Birchmore's advocate. I would be happy to chat with you, Missy. Do you want to just email me something's off pod and we can talk? I don't know how much time I'm going to have that day just because I'm going to be with the documentary crew. But we can definitely talk about it for sure. I would love to have you there. I feel that way about Sandra Birchmore too. I would actually love to talk to you in depth about Sandra Birchmore, Missy. So let's open the dialogue here so we can talk about it, because that's the other case where I'm really sad that it's a federal case and we're not going to be able to be in that courtroom. Well, I mean, we won't be able to see what's happening, but we'll probably be able to hear. Oh no, we won't be able to hear. We won't be able to record it all. Yeah, that's gonna suck. I hate that it's a federal case. I really do. That would be amazing. Yeah, I can talk to Emily C too. Let's see. It's a problem when political opinion determines judicial rulings. I would agree with that. Let's see. Amber Hunt is one of my journalist crushes, Allie said. I'm putting all of Allie's comments up. Maggie Freeling is my number one. Maggie Freeling is the reason I started like being like, oh, I think I want to write more true crime stuff. I saw the documentary on Oxygen that she did about Maura Murray's case. And I was like, that's the kind of journalist I want to be. You know what I mean? Like Maggie really inspired me, even though she's like a child. She's a kid compared to me. I love her though. I love her so much. I've had Maggie on the show, Allie. I think we did a members only together at some point, like earlier on. You would definitely recognize Amber's voice if you heard it. Yeah. Well, I hope that we get to talk about Scott Peterson. F.R. Smith. I can't see my way around Scott Peterson. Perhaps there are facts I am unaware of. There might be. Rebecca and I are we're pretty strong in our opinions about that. And we actually agree. Oh my God. Regular RN. We should be paying you $50. What are you doing? That is amazing. Thank you so much. God, you guys, you're so generous. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I love our nurses. You guys make the world turn. Okay, guys, I'm going to start wrapping this up. Oh, I don't think I'm heading for a Pulitzer. That is like one of the biggest compliments I've ever got, Jody, that I am like Maggie. And heading for, I don't think I'm heading for a Pulitzer, but being compared to Maggie Freeling is a huge fucking compliment. Thank you. Let's see. Murder and Alliance is so good. Everybody should go listen. That's one of Maggie's series. God, I loved Murder and Alliance. Loved it. I know it was difficult for Maggie, but I friggin' love that series so much. Let's see. Okay. You guys are awesome. We're going to be back here at 8 a.m. We're probably going to do a shorter stream tomorrow because Rebecca's back is killing her. And because I have a hard out at like 9:15, 9:10, 9:15. We have a couple of things to talk about tomorrow. There were some orders that came out from Gilday's bench. This fucking guy. And I have to say, every time all the law tubers talk about Gilday, I feel like I'm on the right side of this. Don't tell Rebecca, but I feel like I'm on the right side of this. I love you all so much. Thanks for hanging out with me. Thanks for listening to the story. The thing you can do to help is tell people about it. Tell people about the podcast. And I'm not saying that because I want like numbers. I want the whole reason I started podcasting was because I felt like what was happening with Free Karen Reed, like what Turtle Boy had done with Karen Reed, I needed to be doing that for Pam Smart. And I have not had the success that Turtle Boy has had. So if you guys can share the story, that's the most important part. And really wish us luck on Monday. I know it's a few days away, but please put some good thoughts out into the atmosphere. Pray to whoever you believe in, and let's just hope the right thing finally happens. That's all I can say about that. I appreciate you all so much. Thanks for the tips. Thanks for the super chats. Thanks for being members. Thanks for sitting here. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being involved and being emotional right along with me. I appreciate you all so much. I will see you back here at 8 a.m. Everybody have a good night. Sweet dreams. Good morning, everybody. I am Mel Barrett.
I'm Rebecca Lavoie, allegedly. I'm Smart.
Happy Monday, everybody. I am Mel Barrett.
I'm Rebecca Lavoie. Happy gay summer, Mel.
Happy hump day, everybody. I am Mel Barrett.
I'm not humping anybody. I'm Rebecca Lavoie.
Happy Saturday, everybody. I am Mel Barrett. Oh, no.
I'm Rebecca Lavoie, and my mic is muted.
Good morning, everybody. I am Mel Barrett.
I'm Rebecca Lavoie, and that's Briscoe.
And welcome to Something's Off, a true crime podcast where we swat the haters aside with our astute takes and humor and joy. And
the joylessness
I don't
of
give
those
a fucking
people.
miss. Blah.
Hags.
You hear it first in the break in the story. One little crack and the whole thing gets wary. A witness swears but the timeline bends. A smile too smooth and the trail just ends. Mel Barrett says, hold up, look again. Rebecca Lavoie follows every thread. If it feels too neat, then it's not the truth. There's a shadow line running through the room. Something's off, something's off. You can feel it in the bones. Something's off, something's off. When the facts won't come home. Something's off, something's off. And the case won't stay in place. Something's off. We're the ones who chase.
This is
Pull it,
literally
Jimmy.
because it's 100. It's been happening for the past day.
Oh, dear God. Everywhere's a hot spot when Dr. Wolf is on the TV. Am I right? Everywhere's a hot spot when Dr. Wolf is on the TV. I'm sorry. This is very funny.
What are you laughing about?
Because you're just sitting there waiting for the video to start.
I was listening this whole time. You
Listening to what? You're not playing anything, and now you're frozen. God, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Let me text Mel. Let me call Mel real quick. I'm going to call Mel.
No, I'm not answering your call. I'm not doing it.
I don't think.
Why is it? Oh, Jesus.
Maybe go back on the Wi-Fi.
I am back on the Wi-Fi. Can you hear me now? Can we do the show now? Should we do the show now? Rebecca? Rebecca, can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Internet. Hello.
Hello? Hello, worldwide interwebs. Can you hear me? Let's do this. I have to look at my phone over here.
We're going to go members only.
Something's off. We're the ones who chase. Yeah, we're the ones who chase. Wait, did that witness just blink 3 times? Something's off.